One Piece. The worst pirates in history, starting from Rock's pirates. Chapter 41. Returning to Shaki's side, she and Little Teach were both fine, but three uninvited guests had appeared. Newgate, Linlin, Kaido, why are you here? York's face showed surprise, his eyes full of confusion. If he remembered correctly, in the previous life's manga plot, Charlotte Linlin should have just arrived near the treasure room, taking the Azure Dragon fruit from Kuma and Ivankov. Although Ivankov and Kuma's movements had changed in this life due to him, it shouldn't have affected Charlotte Linlin's movements, right? The butterfly effect wasn't supposed to work like this. Mama. York, you're quick. Charlotte Linlin didn't answer York's question, but looked at Shaki and Little Teach, a smile in her eyes. Is this little brat Rox's child? Whitebeard also curiously glanced at Little Teach and explained. We noticed something seemed to be happening with Rox, so we came to check. York pouted. If you came for Rox, go find Rox. The fight over there is heating up, what are you doing here with me? Kaido was not like the other two, he was much more direct. York, since you've rescued Shaki, have you also gotten the devil fruits? Can you give me one? At these words, Whitebeard and Charlotte Linlin, who had previously overlooked this point, both perked up, their gazes fixed on York. Charlotte Linlin showed an ambiguous smile. York, have you gotten all the devil fruits? What are their abilities? I want to prepare one for my child too. In exchange, I can have a child with you. York rolled his eyes in exasperation and retorted, forget it, there's too much of a size difference between us, I'm not interested in you. I mainly came for Rox, but if there are devil fruits, I wouldn't mind asking you for one. Whitebeard was a bit more reserved, but he also showed his craving for top-tier devil fruits. Among the entire Rox pirates, besides York, he was probably the one who most recognized Rox as his captain. It wasn't an endorsement of Rox's ideals, but after a long time together, he had developed feelings and considered Rox a friend and family member. Whitebeard hadn't been wrong, his initial intention was indeed for Rox. It was only when he accidentally discovered Shaki and York that he temporarily shifted his target to them. York's gaze swept left and right. Although all three wanted the devil fruits in his hand, as of now, there were no signs of them making a move. York knew that they weren't snatching them yet, mainly out of the camaraderie from their daily interactions, along with some apprehension about his strength. Moreover, whether it was York, Whitebeard, Kaido, or Linlin, they all had a basic bottom line for how they conducted themselves, unlike bottomless individuals like Wang Ji. Plus, they were currently comrades on the same ship. Unless absolutely necessary, they truly didn't want to completely break ties and engage in a fight to the death. Besides that, York also thought about the future. As a transmigrator without a system, making many friends and few enemies was the most basic rule of survival. Thinking this, he took the sack containing the devil fruits from Shaki's hand. I can give you the devil fruits. But these aren't free gifts. Opening the sack, York pulled out the Azure Dragon fruit, whose skin resembled fish scales. Kaido. This is a mythical zone fish fruit, Azure Dragon form devil fruit. It's a top-tier mythical zone. If you want it, you have to become my crewmate. Kaido was stunned, recalling York's previous invitation. In essence, York's ideals, to put it plainly, were no different from Rox's, at most varying in the means of achievement. And Kaido, having suffered persecution from corrupt nobles and the world government in his early years, had long wanted to eliminate all these disgusting things. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to Hashinosu Island, let alone joined the Rox pirate crew. After a brief thought, Kaido finally nodded. No problem. However, if your future principles of action go against what you told me before, I will leave your side. York smiled calmly and tossed the Azure Dragon fruit to Kaido. Just you wait. I will definitely do better than Rox. Kaido caught the fruit, and as if fearing it would be snatched away, he immediately shoved it into his mouth. He bit it, swallowed it, all in less than a second. Immediately after, Kaido's body underwent a massive transformation. His body was covered in dragon scales, his limbs turned into dragon claws, his mouth protruded into a dragon snout, dragon horns grew on his forehead, and his massive body soared into the sky. Worororo. A joyful laugh echoed through the sky, and the mighty Azure Dragon descended upon God Valley. Kaido looked at his current body, and in his excitement, he he directly opened his mouth and spewed a blast of dragon's breath towards Rox's direction. A massive pillar of fire streaked across the sky, and the military uniform woman, who was currently fighting Rox, subtly shifted her gaze, her slender body sidestepping to easily dodge Kaido's dragon's breath. Rumble. The dragon's breath struck the towering mountain in God Valley, immediately blasting a huge cave with a diameter of 100 meters. York watched this scene from afar, exclaiming, "The power is not bad. But he just ate the fruit, so there's still room for improvement." Wororororo. Amidst loud laughter, Kaido transformed back into his human form and voluntarily walked to stand behind York. From this moment on, he was York's subordinate. Of course, he wasn't a crewmate yet. That would only count after Rox's death and York formed a new pirate crew. Looking at Kaido, who had just demonstrated his abilities, Whitebeard and Charlotte Linlin's eyes simultaneously flashed with envy. Such a top-tier ability, and York just gave it away. He was truly generous. Immediately after, they also began to anticipate what fruits York would give them. A precondition. Before York took out the second fruit, Whitebeard said, "I'm not planning to become your crewmate. If we are ultimately defeated in this battle and the Rox pirate crew disbands, I plan to form my own pirate crew." Charlotte Linlin immediately chimed in, "Me too." Hearing this, York was not surprised at all. He hadn't actually thought of inviting anyone other than Kaido to join his crew. So, as he pulled the second devil fruit from the sack, he laughed and said, "Don't worry. I only need Kaido as a crewmate. After you get the devil fruits, you just owe me a favor." With that, York tossed the second devil fruit to Whitebeard. Zone snake fruit, mythical beast type, Yamata no Orochi form. If Newgate is going to form a new pirate crew, this fruit is perfect for your first mate. Whitebeard caught the fruit, a hint of joy flashing in his eyes. "Thanks, York, I owe you a favor." Then, York continued to pull out the third devil fruit. "Linlin. The devil fruit you want, it's probably for Katakuri, right?" Katakuri was exactly 10 years old this year. Because his younger sister, Charlotte Brûlé, had a long cut across her face, he angrily awakened his conqueror's haki and killed all the pirates who bullied Charlotte Brûlé. It was because of this that Charlotte Linlin began to pay special attention to this second son. Zone dog fruit, mythical beast type, Cerberus form. This fruit should not bury Katakuri's talent. York tossed the third devil fruit to Charlotte Linlin. She caught it, and joy also flashed in her eyes, but immediately after, her gaze shifted to the sack in York's hand. After giving away 3 fruits, this bag is still so bulging. There must be many more top-tier devil fruits inside, right? So what? York roared, unleashing a powerful conqueror's haki, black and red lightning shattering rocks, demonstrating his unshakable will. "I snatched these by my own ability. If you want to snatch them from me, no problem. Just draw your sword and fight." York's assertiveness made Charlotte Linlin's expression freeze. She had only asked casually, yet he reacted so strongly. "Forget it, among my children currently, only Katakuri is accomplished, preparing a devil fruit for him is enough." York sneered and added, "Remember. You also owe me a favor." God Valley, the center of the Great Canyon. While York and Old Saturn were locked in fierce combat, and Rox and the military uniform woman were similarly engaged. The Rox pirates, represented by Golden Lion, John, Wang Ji, and others, along with the Roger pirates, who had charged in from the other side of the island, all simultaneously plunged into the Great Canyon. They successfully converged in the central plaza of the Great Canyon. Immediately after, both sides launched into a massive free-for-all. "Shaki is mine. I should be the first to rescue Shaki. All of you, don't get in the way." Amidst their bickering, no one noticed that Shaki, the one they intended to save, was no longer there. Rayleigh. Roger swung his blade, deliberately maintaining a stalemate with Golden Lion. "I'm tied up right now. Shaki is up to you." Jabba did the same, pretending to compete in axe skills with Silver Axe, the two fighting to a draw. Rayleigh, spurred on by his brother's expectations, leapt from the crowd like lightning, swiftly cutting through the encirclement and rushing into the cell where Shaki had been held. However, when Rayleigh saw the scattered shackles and chains inside the cell, his heart sank. Has Shaki been rescued? Or has she already? Rayleigh couldn't bring himself to say the words, met with misfortune, and he hoped the truth wasn't that grim. Seeing Rayleigh emerge from the cell, utterly disheartened. Roger and Jabba, who had initially expected a joyous reunion, were puzzled, so they quickly disengaged from their battles and rushed into the cell to check. After some time, the Roger pirates and the Rocks pirates, who had been locked in intense combat, all ceased their movements. Both sides stood on opposite ends, confronting each other. Shaki is gone. This was the reason everyone stopped fighting. The devil fruit had also disappeared. They began to question each other, asking if anyone had seen the escaping Shaki and the devil fruit. The ultimate result, of course, was that neither side had seen them. Golden Lion and the other Rocks Pirates members exchanged glances. After this exchange, they seemed to have guessed the truth of the matter. She was most likely rescued by York. And the devil fruit was probably taken by him too. That fool. His ability is too useful. Let's team up and take him down when we get back. The problem now is, we can't let the Roger pirates know about this. Otherwise, we'll have a whole new batch of competitors. Silent communication passed through their eyes, and the Rocks pirates finally reached a consensus. Let's go back. Shaki is gone, this island has no value anymore. John feigned disdain and helplessness, dragging a large bag of treasure as he turned and left. Woo woo woo. Shaki. My Shaki-chan. Golden Lion wailed loudly, his acting realistic, and followed John, turning to leave. All the other Rocks Pirates members did the same. Either crying sorrowfully or looking dejected and helpless. But regardless of their expressions, everyone moved in unison. They returned the way they came. Seeing this, the Roger pirates wanted to follow them and search the town on the other side of the island. Because they also felt that Shaki might have been rescued by other members of the Rocks pirates. Like Rocks, or York. At least those two, the Roger pirates hadn't seen them since landing on God Valley. It was possible that Shaki had been rescued by them, who had gotten there first. However, just as they were about to give chase, the sorrowfully crying Golden Lion reached out and supported the mountain wall on one side of the Great Canyon. Shaki. Shaki. Amidst his sorrowful wailing, the mountain wall collapsed, and countless broken stones fell. The trailing Roger pirates were forced to retreat, and ultimately could only watch helplessly as half the mountain collapsed, completely blocking the canyon passage. Hurry! Hurry! Having done all this, Golden Lion instantly quickened his pace. Go find York. That fool. It must be him. The Rocks Pirates members heard this and all quickened their pace, rushing towards the exit of the Great Canyon together. Just like when they arrived, everyone pushed and pulled, no one letting anyone get ahead. We've been played. Roger cursed loudly. Shaki must have been kidnapped by Rocks and York. Those two fools landed on the island much earlier than us. As his voice fell, Roger drew his sword, condensed his haki, and was about to cleave the mountain blocking their path. But just then, an excited shout suddenly rang out from above the collapsed mountain. Ha ha ha. Roger. I found you. Beast. It's Garp. How is that fool so fast? The annoyed Roger had to temporarily abandon clearing the roadblock and swung his sword to confront the infatuated Garp descending from the sky. Ora ora ora. Shaki. I'm here to save you. It's me. It's me instead. Boom. Who ambushed me? A boisterous crowd burst out of the Great Canyon, just in time to collide with the aftermath of a battle between Rocks and the military uniform woman. Golden Lion and everyone else were all thrown back. They weren't seriously injured, but everyone was in a disheveled state. After climbing out of the rubble, they immediately began searching for whoever had ambushed them. Sizzle. Haoshoku lightning, tearing through the sky, condensed on a long blade as Rocks leapt high, bringing his blade down on the floating woman below. The woman wielded her devil fruit trident, parrying from below, neither side successfully suppressing the other. The second wave of battle impact swept over, and Golden Lion and all the others fell silent. How can there be such a monstrous woman, able to duel Rocks? John casually complained, immediately attracting the attention of the woman in the sky. The rumored Rocks pirates. The woman voluntarily retreated, putting distance between herself and Rocks. Then she raised her hand and summoned a magic book with a pentagram magic circle. Listen up. Rocks pirates. From now on, you shall betray the Rocks pirates. Become the claws of Mu. See Rocks as your enemy. Capture Rocks, child. Kill Rocks, people. You can obtain the former pirate empress, Shaki. Mu will bestow upon you evil power. In exchange for a portion of your lifespan. Mu bestows upon you an immortal body and extraordinary power. Under Mu's control, loyalty and common sense will no longer trouble you. Becoming a devil is the essence of life. Devil's contract. Holding the magic book in one hand, chanting a spell, she drew a pentagram magic circle in the air with her other hand. At the moment the chant ended, the military uniform woman flicked the drawn pentagram magic circle towards the Rock's pirates. A pentagram magic circle simultaneously reappeared beneath the feet of each of the Rock's pirates members. Golden Lion, using the power of his float fruit, immediately leapt upwards into the sky. The pentagram magic circle branded on the ground beneath his feet lost its target as Golden Lion moved away, and slowly dissipated. But the others, who lacked flying abilities, were swallowed by the magic circle. It was as if they were stepping on swampy mud, not rock and earth. Woowa. We're sinking. What kind of ability is this? A Logia-type swamp fruit. Amidst their shouts of surprise, John, Silver Axe, and others had half their bodies swallowed by the magic circle. The woman floating in the sky flipped her hand up and down. Black reversal domination. The magic circle that had swallowed the Rock's pirates began to rotate 180 degrees. John's and others' upper bodies, which had not been swallowed by the magic circle, were not hindered by the physical rules of the ground and were forcibly flipped underground, while their lower bodies, previously swallowed by the magic circle, appeared above ground. Then, their feet, mutated by the magic circle, stepped onto the ground, forcibly pulling out their upper bodies that had not been swallowed by the magic circle. Roar. Beast-like roars erupted from their mouths. Compared to their normal selves before, their bodies had now expanded several times over. Devil horns grew from the sides of their heads, devil wings sprouted from their backs, their teeth turned into sharp fangs, and their eyes lost their pupils and irises, becoming ghastly white and emitting an eerie glow. Golden Lion floated in the sky, looking down at the dramatically transformed pirate crew members below, a bead of cold sweat trickling down his forehead. What kind of bizarre ability is this? Under the military uniform woman's ability, the Rock's pirates transformed into devil-like forms. Their bodies also grew many times larger than before. The Golden Lion, who had escaped, looked down at them from above, his face filled with lingering fear. Roar. I feel invincible right now. What a powerful feeling. The mission objective is to capture Rocks, child. Eliminate Rocks. If we complete the mission, we can get Shaki. Awoo awoo awoo. The devils truly howled like ghosts and wolves. They completely ignored the Golden Lion in the sky and rushed towards a certain part of the town, yelling. Back to York. He had just given 3 devil fruits to Kaido, Whitebeard, and Charlotte Linlin, respectively. In the blink of an eye, he saw a large group of his former teammates, now demonized, charging towards them. Rock's child found. Grab him. Kill him. What's going on? Looking at the large group of former teammates, whose bodies had expanded several times and whose forms had turned into devils, York's face was filled with confusion and bewilderment. Just then, the Golden Lion flew down from the sky and explained, they're being controlled by a woman's ability. York understood instantly. The woman fighting Rocks. The Golden Lion nodded slightly, and then he seemed to finally notice Shaki, looking at her with pleasant surprise. Shaki-chan, so you were here. I was so worried when I couldn't find you earlier. Shaki forced a smile. Thank you for your concern, Shaki. Ah, Shaki-chan thanked me. The Golden Lion was engrossed, completely oblivious to Whitebeard and Charlotte Linlin quietly putting the devil fruits into their pockets. Hand over Rocks, child. Silver Axe, the Golden Lion's archenemy and love-hate teammate, was the first to charge in front of everyone, brandishing his axe, which had transformed from a single-edged broadex into a double-edged giant axe, and sweeping it forcefully. The massive double-edged battle axe encompassed everyone in its attack range, completely disregarding the fate of Rocks, son he claimed to want. Whitebeard's expression darkened, and he threw a punch towards the side where the axe was coming from. The Tremor fruit's ability activated, the air shattered like glass, and the powerfully sweeping battle axe stalled, unable to advance an inch. York handed the sack containing the devil fruits back to Shaki and leapt up from the ground. His fist, imbued with Conqueror's haki, struck Silver Axe, his former teammate, with a full-force blow, showing no hesitation. Fist bone, crushing punch. Boom. Black and red lightning exploded, and Silver Axe, who no longer possessed his former combat awareness, had his head instantly blown to smithereens. Heavenly Thunderfire. Charlotte Linlin once again used the move she had previously used against Garp. She merged Prometheus, the flame in her left hand, with Zeus, the thundercloud in her right, and then unleashed a dual-attribute flame energy wave. The other demonized former teammates who were attacking were all blasted away by this energy wave. Although they didn't suffer fatal injuries, they all had varying degrees of burns. Thunder Bagua. Kaido even directly manifested his Azure Dragon Fruit's dragon human form, swinging his Kanabo and smashing it into John's face. John's previous weapon was a mechanical arm. Now, after being demonized, his entire body was encased in mechanical armor, with only his head exposed. Although Kaido's blow wasn't imbued with Haoshoku, he hadn't learned it yet. Due to his immense base strength and the internal destruction caused by armament haki, he still deformed John's skull. In that instant, Whitebeard, York, Charlotte Linlin, and Kaido, all four of them working together, immediately suppressed the seemingly formidable demonized Rock's pirate crew. This scene even made the Golden Lion, who was engrossed with Shaki, momentarily snap back to reality, his eyes showing solemnity. These four guys, when did they get so close? But their attacks are too brutal, I've never hit a teammate that hard. Before the Golden Lion could figure out the reason, the demonized Rock's pirate crew once again displayed a terrifying ability that left him dumbfounded. Silver Axe, whose head had been smashed, and John, whose skull had been deformed by Kaido, quickly recovered from their injuries as if time had reversed. Even those who had been burned by Charlotte Linlin's ability saw their burn scars quickly disappear. In the blink of an eye, it was as if nothing had happened, their severe injuries seemed to have been just an illusion. Immortal body. The Golden Lion looked stunned, then remembered what the woman had said during her chant. It's actually true. York landed from the sky, rejoining the group. Looking at this group of former teammates, who were like unkillable cockroaches, his expression was solemn. They are controlled by that woman, conventional methods can no longer kill them. The only method we can try now is seawater. If we submerge them in seawater, or drown them with it, their abilities should become ineffective. With that, York looked at Whitebeard and the Golden Lion. Now I need you two to cooperate. Only your two abilities can control seawater here. York's words were straightforward enough, even offering a simple and effective solution. Although not entirely guaranteed to be effective, it at least seemed highly feasible. However, after hearing his words, the Golden Lion merely tossed his head arrogantly. Huh. Cooperate. With Newgate. York, you're not kidding, are you? I can fly. I don't need to waste time with you guys here. Then, the Golden Lion turned to Shaki. Shaki-chan, it's too dangerous here. Let me take you off this island. We'll run away together. Shaki showed a hint of weakness on her face and said, on the verge of tears, but I'm so scared right now, can you please get rid of these evil guys first? The Golden Lion, who had just been unwilling to cooperate, instantly changed his expression. Shaki-chan, wait. I'll go get seawater right now. To douse these brainless wastes. With that, the Golden Lion soared into the sky, unleashing several flying slashes towards the sea outside the island. The golden slashes landed in the sea, cutting the seawater into several cubic blocks. These blocks were imbued with the Golden Lion's Devil Fruit ability and flew towards them under his control. Seeing this, Whitebeard temporarily abandoned his plan to directly cause a tsunami with his own ability and instead punched the front. He sent all the demonized Rock's pirate crew members who were attacking flying. But just like before, with their immortal bodies, even if their internal organs were shattered by Whitebeard, they could still quickly recover. Yahahaha. Wake up, you fools. The Golden Lion let out a wild laugh, and the seawater he had controlled to fly released its ability control, free falling from the sky. Boom. Thousands of tons of seawater crashed down like bricks, covering all the demonized Rock's pirate crew members. Splash. The seawater roared, forming a small tsunami. York cautiously picked up Shaki and jumped to higher ground, looking expectantly at the group of demonized former teammates. What happened? The seawater that Golden Lion had smashed down receded like a tide, revealing the Rock's pirate crew, who had returned to normal. They lay in the ruins in various postures, spitting out mouthfuls of salty seawater, looking utterly bewildered. York descended from a high point and observed carefully. He found that all these people had aged to varying degrees. The degree of aging seemed to depend on the injuries they had sustained earlier and the extent of their self-healing. Trading lifespan for immortality. York inwardly speculated about the military uniform woman's ability. No. He was speculating about Imu's ability. Rox had said earlier that this military uniform woman was nothing more than a possessed puppet. This ability should be like mine, with two uses. One way allows for rationality, just like the Gorosei and the God's Knights. Not only do they gain immortality, but they also have no side effects, and theoretically, they can even achieve eternal life through it. The second way is probably the usage from just now. Although it didn't completely strip away their sanity, their former combat intelligence was greatly weakened. Correspondingly, there was a strengthening of their physique and power. Shaki-chan. I've done what you wished for. Can you come with me now? Golden Lion chuckled and flew to Shaki's side. The other still bewildered Rock's pirate crew members instantly sobered up upon hearing this. Don't even think about running off, Shaki. Silver Axe was the first to rush over again, grabbing Golden Lion's clothes. However, having just recovered from his demonization, his body was very weak, and his grip was clearly insufficient. Golden Lion easily shook him off and pointed his sword at his throat. You bunch of good-for-nothings. If it weren't for me just now, you almost killed Shaki. Anyone who harbors murderous intent towards Shaki is not qualified to continue pursuing Shaki. This one sentence instantly provoked public outrage. However, even in their anger, the weakened crowd was helpless against the now in his prime Golden Lion. Silver Axe and John tried to struggle but were knocked down by Golden Lion, one after the other. The latter stepped on Silver Axe's back and laughed heartily. Yahahahaha. The victor is me, Shaki. Silver Axe pounded the ground with his fist, unwilling to accept defeat. If it weren't for that military uniform woman, how could he have been so humiliated by Shaki? Speaking of which, Shaki, I was the one who truly rescued Shaki first, wasn't I? York suddenly interjected, asserting his claim. Golden Lion's laughter stopped, and he glared menacingly at York. Was I? Why don't I know about this? The moment his voice fell, he swung his sword, unleashing a golden slash. Slash wave. Always vigilant, York wrapped armament hockey around his fist and punched the slash away, his expression darkening. You betrayed us, Shaki. Yahahaha. We were never comrades, York. Golden Lion bared his teeth in a sinister grin. It was merely a cooperative relationship. Black and red lightning coiled around Golden Lion's twin swords, and he once again actively attacked York. However, just then, a spiked club and a large naginata were simultaneously swung towards Golden Lion. Golden Lion's expression changed, and he had no choice but to block their attacks first. Kaido. Newgate. What is the meaning of this? The ambushed Golden Lion was sent flying, and he angrily demanded an explanation. Wororororo. Kaido smiled faintly, resting his spiked club on his shoulder. You don't acknowledge York as a comrade. But I do. If you insist on killing York, I will definitely stand with him. Golden Lion's face twitched. You foolish brats. He then turned his gaze to Whitebeard, wondering what was up with that fool. Whitebeard likewise rested Murakumogiri on his shoulder. He calmly stated, Shaki, being a pirate still requires some basic righteousness. Now is the time when we need to unite and face our common enemy. If you insist on causing a split, then I will have no choice but to be impolite with you. Ma. Charlotte Linlin also burst into laughter nearby. She had actually wanted to make a move earlier but was beaten to it by Kaido and Whitebeard. One who eats from another's hand is beholden to them. Shaki, I just received benefits from York, so I can't just stand by and watch you kill him. La la. Black and red lightning flashed, and York clenched his fist, stepping forward. Shaki, do you insist on settling this today? This was a question, but also a threat. If Golden Lion disregarded the bigger picture, he would definitely team up with Whitebeard, Kaido, and Charlotte Linlin to keep him here permanently. What original plot? It had already collapsed the moment he joined the Rock's pirate crew. He didn't care if there was one less legend of a great pirate related to Golden Lion in later generations. Golden Lion's face was grim. He looked left and right at the quartet who had completely ganged up, and finally shifted his gaze to Shaki, who was taking care of Teach. Shaki, I ask you, are you willing to come with me? Shaki was slightly surprised, then gently shook her head. Sorry, Shaki, York saved me first. I can't possibly abandon him and leave with you without repaying his kindness. HMPH. Golden Lion snorted in displeasure. All right. One after another. You're all ganging up. Since none of you want me around, I'm not playing anymore. Anyway, there's nothing else I want in God Valley. The Rock's pirate crew is disbanded as of today. Having said that, Golden Lion shot straight into the sky, flying rapidly towards the distant horizon. Gazing at his retreating figure, York had a mind to stop him but ultimately decided against it. The immediate priority was whether or not to rescue Rox. He was still fiercely battling that military uniform woman. However, before York could make a decision, a sudden whooshing sound echoed. York abruptly turned his head and saw that the attacker was Garen, whom he had seen earlier in the central plaza of the Grand Canyon. However, Garen's target was not Shaki, as York instinctively guessed, nor was it the young Teach beside Shaki. Instead, it was Rox's wife, Alice, who had been dead for a long time and lay there motionless. Garen tucked Alice under his arm with one hand and quickly sped away under everyone's gaze. He even had time to look back. His eyes held both the displeasure of losing Shaki and hostility towards York. However, the current mission was urgent, and he could distinguish between what was important and what was not. York watched Garen disappear, frowning slightly, and only after a few seconds did he finally react. Oh no. They're going to resurrect Rox's wife to threaten him. York didn't know if Amu truly possessed such an ability, but Garen would never abduct Rox's wife's corpse for no reason. Surely that guy wouldn't want to do strange things with a corpse. York, having guessed part of the truth, immediately set off in Garen's direction. Kaido didn't hesitate for a moment, immediately following close behind York. Shaki glanced at the still unconscious Teach, feeling a bit at a loss. Shaki, you take care of Teach for now. York's voice drifted from afar. Shaki sighed softly, ultimately not going anywhere, and did not take the opportunity to steal York's devil fruit and flee. Whitebeard and Charlotte Linlin greedily eyed the sack in Shaki's hand. But they ultimately had their bottom line. The two discussed briefly. They finally decided that Whitebeard would follow to check the situation, and Charlotte Linlin would stay behind to protect Shaki. It wasn't that they were worried about the God's Knights launching a sneak attack. Rather, it was about the Rock's pirate crew members in the vicinity who were temporarily in a weakened state. They were not to be trusted. Golden Lion's actions just now were the best proof. Silver Axe and others watched York, Kaido, and Whitebeard's retreating figures, and he and John silently got up. The others, seeing this, looked over simultaneously, then everyone, by unspoken agreement, looked at Charlotte Linlin and Shaki. Linlin, if you hand over Shaki now, we can spare your life. Mama, you weaklings. You're all just trash. A sinister smile appeared on Charlotte Linlin's face. Prometheus in her left hand, Zeus in her right, not showing any fear. At the same time, at the furthest point of the entire group, Chong Mianbao, whose target was also suspected to be Shaki, silently focused his gaze on the Rock's pirate crew members in front of him. These guys seemed to have forgotten that Charlotte Linlin was brought out by him. Raised by him. Could it be that they really thought he would kill his adopted daughter for a woman? Everyone, those with knives drew them, those with axes picked them up, and those with mechanical arms began to activate their mechanisms. A battle was about to erupt. At the central battlefield. The battle between Rox and Amu was still ongoing. The two remained evenly matched, neither able to overcome the other. However, as time passed, Rox began to show some signs of heavy breathing. The military uniform woman possessed by Amu, however, still appeared to be in her perfect prime. It's useless, Rox, you knew back then that you couldn't defeat Amu, and now you are even less of a match for Amu. In the end, it will just be you exhausting your stamina and ultimately being cut down by Amu. Rather than that, why not choose another path? Your combat power is excellent, Amu can make an exception and allow you to join the God's Knights, to serve as the next captain of the God's Knights. Rox scoffed at this. To be your dog. Wahahaha. If I had wanted to, I would have been your dog back then. Today, I'm going to truly slay a god. His long blade was wrapped in an extreme conqueror's haki, and every strand of lightning ribbon it emitted could tear through the air. Rox roared, God-slaying slash. He gripped his long blade with both hands and swept it with all his might. A terrifying slash, imbued with the power of conqueror's haki, swept across the entire island. Amu swung his devil fruit trident, actively splitting his body in two, and after the slash passed through the gap in his divided body, he quickly recovered as if time had flowed backward. Clang! The atmosphere let out a sword cry, and York, who was rushing forward at full speed, suddenly performed a backbend. A flying slash with extreme cutting and destructive power flew past him, just 1 meter in front, nearly cutting him in half. Kaido, seeing York's movement from behind, also directly dove forward and rolled on the ground, likewise narrowly avoiding being cut in half. Whitebeard, further behind, chose to confront it head-on. Because behind him were Shaki, Teach, and Charlotte Linlin. Leaving aside what Charlotte Linlin would do, Shaki would definitely not be able to block it, although Teach might not even be grazed due to his small stature. Clenching his fist, he delivered a shockwave punch, and in order to shatter the slash in front of him, Whitebeard was pushed back dozens of meters, finally succeeding in pulverizing it. On the other side, in the center of the island, near the central plaza of the Great Canyon, Garp and Roger's battle was also in full swing here. Suddenly, a slash that swept across the entire island flew over their heads, cutting another large mountain, which had not yet suffered serious damage, in half. Thousands upon thousands of tons of mountain rock slowly slid down along the cutting mark, seemingly about to bury the entire God Valley Canyon. Roger finally gave the order to retreat. My lads. Flee. Get out of the canyon first. Then figure out how to find Shaki's whereabouts. Don't think of escaping. Garp didn't care about the sliding mountain. He usually practiced his punches using mountains, so how could he be afraid of being buried alive by one? However, at the same time, he also felt a sense of dread towards that slash. Because if that slash had landed on him, even if he hadn't been cut in half on the spot, he would probably have been severely wounded. Of course, if he were to fight face to face with the owner of that slash, the other party would certainly not have an easy time either. Returning to Rock's side. After delivering that slash, which could be called beyond his limits, he had no choice but to temporarily halt his offensive, standing in place to catch his breath and recover. Amu was not in a hurry to attack, just watching him calmly, as if waiting for something. Before long, Garen appeared, with Rock's wife, Alice, tucked under his arm. As soon as he arrived, he shouted, "Master!" A subtle hint of relief flickered in Imu's beautiful eyes. Then, as he had done before to the Rock's pirate crew, he waved his hand to draw a 5-pointed star magic circle, casting it at Garen's feet. Garen voluntarily put down the corpse he was carrying, allowing the magic circle to consume it, while he himself leapt out of the magic circle. As the strongest of the current God's Knights, he had not yet signed a contract with Amu. The reason was simple: he had talent, and he believed he could continue to grow. It wouldn't be too late to gain eternal life after his strength had grown to its limit. Rox, of course, also saw Amu and Garen's actions. He appeared in front of Garen in a flash. Garen eagerly drew his sword to challenge Rox, but Rox directly struck him with a single blow, sending him flying. However, Garen's momentary obstruction was ultimately effective. The magic circle successfully consumed Alice's corpse completely, and then rotated 180 degrees. Alice. Under Rox, anxious and disbelieving call, a demonized Alice, whose body had also grown to over 4 meters, slowly rose from the magic circle. She first looked at her body in confusion. I'm not dead. Then she noticed Rox, who was right in front of her. Jebek, how did you get smaller? Rock's physique was robust, but his height was not exaggerated, just over 3 meters, the standard height of an admiral. However, at this moment, standing in front of his wife, who was over 4 meters tall, he appeared slightly petite. How did you come back to life? Rox stared blankly at his wife, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. This is the miracle that a god can achieve. Emu's voice sounded from behind rocks. If you surrender to me, you can reunite with your wife. You won't have to endure the pain of separation and death anymore. Emu's words were full of temptation. Immediately after, Alice, who had been transformed into a demon and resurrected, followed up, advising, Jebek, stop. Your plan has failed, and I don't want to live that life of hiding anymore. Even if you don't think of yourself, or me, think of Teach. Can you bear for him to become an orphan with no parents from now on? Looking at his resurrected wife before him, and listening to her affectionate persuasion, Rox truly wavered for a moment. But soon, his expression darkened, and he swung his blade, splitting the demon Alice in half. Gee, Jebek. The demon Alice stared blankly at Rox, her eyes filled with disbelief. Fake. You are not Alice. Alice is not that weak. Rox looked up, tears streaming down his face, weeping profusely. Ah. The painful roar almost consumed Rox's sanity. He wildly swung his blade, cutting the demon Alice in front of him into countless pieces. What a ruthless man. Emu's voice was flat, neither mockery nor praise, merely stating a fact. The shredded demon Alice did not die. Like old Saturn and the gods' knights, her shattered body slowly reassembled as if time were rewinding. Jebek. The previously affectionate voice began to turn resentful and sad. Why did you do this? I just wanted to live a peaceful life, to give Teach a wonderful childhood, a bright future. This world has been ruled by the world government for 800 years, why must you rebel? The D family is gone. The important thing now is for the two of us to live well, and for Teach to live well, to continue the D family's bloodline. Each word of persuasion was like a siege ram, pounding against rocks, mental defenses again and again. He kept cutting the demon Alice into pieces, but the tears on his face would not stop. Amu. You are despicable. Rox, filled with grief and indignation, roared to the heavens. He plunged his blade into the ground, wrapped armament hockey around his index fingers, aimed them at his ear canals, and forcefully plunged them in. Poof! Blood gushed out as Rox violently destroyed his hearing. As long as he couldn't hear the demon Alice's words, he would no longer be disturbed by her. Watching this scene, the military uniform woman possessed by Amu, her eyes curved into crescent moons, seemed to feel pleased. Killing your wife with your own hands feels great, doesn't it? Amu is very gratified. Oh, I almost forgot, you can't hear now. In that case. The military uniform woman raised her right hand, remotely withdrawing the ability she had cast upon Alice. The demon Alice, who had been reassembling her body as if time were rewinding, suddenly paused. Wisps of black smoke floated out from the countless body fragments suspended in midair. Then, these body fragments turned into real flesh and splattered onto the ground with a clatter. Rox stared blankly at this scene, his eyes wide with fury. The tears that had been flowing were gradually replaced by tears of blood. Overwhelmed by grief, anger, and extreme mental trauma, Rox clutched his hair with both hands, his screams silenced by the sheer intensity of his sorrow. The woman floating in midair, her eyes curved even wider, like two new moons. She silently raised her hand to draw a magic circle in the air, softly chanting. Rox. You will submit to Amu. Become Emu's minion. Clear out all invading pirates on this island. Amu will bestow upon you wicked power. In exchange for a portion of your lifespan. I will grant you an immortal body and extraordinary strength. After completing the tasks Amu gives you, Amu will resurrect Alice for you. Demon Contract. A brand new 5-pointed star magic circle was projected by the military uniform woman, appearing at Rox's feet. Like a swamp swallowing a lamb that had wandered into it, Rox's body, which had fallen to his knees in grief, began to sink uncontrollably, little by little. The smile in the military uniform woman's eyes did not diminish in the slightest. Just by using a few tricks, she could gain such a powerful fighter as Rox, and this gain indeed made her feel pleased. Decades later, in that predetermined Great War, she would once again achieve ultimate victory. Thinking of this, Amu, possessing the military uniform woman, felt even more pleased. However, at this moment, an island-wide Haoshoku lightning suddenly erupted from Rox. The magic circle, which had almost half swallowed his body and was just about to flip over to transform Rox into a demon, was forced to shatter under this terrifying haki, even impacting the military uniform woman slightly. How is this possible? Amu was somewhat disbelieving. Amu should have truly crushed your conviction. How can you still have such powerful haki? Rocks had destroyed his eardrums, so he couldn't hear Imu's words now, but by looking at her expression, he could roughly guess what she was saying. You scum who only uses insidious and despicable methods. Today on this island, only one of us will walk out alive. Rocks, who had broken through to a new realm due to grief and anger, condensed all his haki onto his long blade. With a flash, he appeared before Amu and brought his blade down. This strike had no name, but space itself twisted under its force. Imu's pupils constricted. She dared not face Rock's strike. She actively split her body again, allowing Rock's blade to pass through her body, which had separated into two halves. But as the vertical slash passed through, she found she couldn't reattach her two halves. Space has been torn. Amu cursed under her breath. Rock's current state involuntarily reminded her of the difficulty of her battle with Joy Boy over 700 years ago. However, Rock's was not Joy Boy after all. Even now, his haki had only just crossed the threshold of being able to harm her true body. It was still far from Joy Boy's peak state. But she wasn't in her true body either. Merely possessing someone, it was difficult to deal with Rock's in his berserk state. Boom! The island below suddenly let out a roar. Along the trajectory of Rock's slash, it split into two islands, left and right. Amu glanced down, her two halves rapidly ascending into the sky, creating distance from Rock's. Rock's, without the ability to fly, had exhausted his strike and could only watch Amu escape, his body uncontrollably falling downwards. Wait for the next strike. I will split you into 4 pieces. Rock's stared intently at Amu in the sky, who had a few drops of cold sweat on her forehead. She wasn't truly afraid of Rock's, but she didn't want the body she was currently possessing to die. After all, possession always required compatibility, and not everyone could unleash their current strength after being possessed by her. Taking advantage of the interval as Rock's fell, before he could launch his next attack. Amu quickly drew 4 5-pointed star magic circles and directly cast them into the air. Come forth, my servants. The time to fight for Amu has come. York was advancing towards the battlefield of Rocks and Amu. Suddenly, after the previous sweeping slash, a Haoshoku lightning that swept across the entire island erupted, followed by a vertical sword light appearing. York first stopped under the deterrence of the Haoshoku lightning, and then saw the entire God Valley Island split directly into 2 halves with a rumbling sound. He couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder, amazed by the power of Rocks and Amu. One day, I will also become that strong. With that, he continued to advance. Before long, he successfully arrived at the battlefield. However, by the time he arrived, Amu had already completed her summoning. 4 distorted black shadows appeared in the sky, their shadows covering the land, bringing a terrifying sense of oppression to God Valley. At the same time, Rocks once again rushed in front of Amu and unleashed a horizontal slash. Because she was summoning her subordinates, Amu didn't have time to self-segment her body, and the slash hit her squarely. Her slender body was divided into 4, and for a short time, these 4 parts of her body could not merge and recover. You're courting death. Among the 4 summoned shadows, the wild boar-shaped shadow roared, then opened its mouth and let out an earth-shattering roar. The huge sound wave, mixed with Conqueror's haki, transformed into a terrifying shockwave, making York involuntarily raise his hands to cover his ears. It's old Mercury. Did Amu summon the other 4 Gorosei? In the sky, Rocks, who was directly in the path, was not affected in the slightest. He had long since destroyed his hearing, so no matter how loud old Mercury roared, he couldn't hear it. As for the Conqueror's haki and shockwave accompanying the roar, in front of the current Rocks, they could only push him backward, but it was unlikely to injure him. Roar. Another roar sounded, and one of the 4 shadows flew out with a flap of its wings. This was a giant monstrous bird with a bird's head, bird's wings, bird's claws, and a snake's body. It first opened its mouth and spewed out raging flames at Rocks, but the latter cleaved it in half with a single slash. Then it directly sacrificed itself and charged, crashing into Rocks and flying into the town area, causing a huge explosion. Thump, thump, thump. At the same time, several black shadows without the ability to fly fell from the sky. Besides the giant wild boar and the monstrous bird that had already revealed their forms, the other two black shadows were a giant skeletal horse and a giant sandworm. The skeletal horse noticed York's presence the moment it landed. It immediately moved its four hooves, and its upper body transformed into the image of a bald old man. Gripping the long sword at his waist with one hand, black flame clouds representing devil fruit awakening floated around his shoulders, and a drawing slash imbued with terrifying cold air and conqueror's haki struck towards York. York, who was always vigilant, was not successfully ambushed. The moment the bald Gorosei drew his sword, he also simultaneously launched a Haoshoku punch. The sword and punch collided in the air, and the center point was squeezed and rubbed into an extremely dazzling crimson light sphere, from which Haoshoku lightning continuously diffused outwards, finally exploding with a bang. York and the bald Gorosei were simultaneously pushed back. The former, due to his size and weight, flew a bit farther, but after stabilizing himself, a playful smile appeared on his face. The legendary Gorosei are nothing more than this. You know, when York saw the Gorosei appear for the first time in the manga in his previous life, their aura was truly shocking. Almost everyone thought they were 5 combatants at least at the admiral level, or even 5-4 emperors level combatants. As a result, in the Egghead Island battle, except for the 4-tusked wild boar Old Mercury, and this skeletal horse Old Jupiter, and the monstrous bird Old Mars, the remaining 2 were truly disappointing. Even the performance of the monstrous bird Old Mars could only be described as mediocre, at best the level of an ordinary admiral. Now, after a real collision with Old Jupiter, York confirmed again. This Old Jupiter, whose performance was second only to Old Mercury, was merely an ordinary 4 emperors level combatant, or a slightly stronger admiral level combatant, similar to his current self. Of course, considering that the opponent has an immortal body and their animal-type devil fruit has awakened, they are definitely stronger than himself at this stage in terms of physical strength and sustained combat. Boom. As the collision between York and Old Jupiter ended, Old Mars on the other side was also, as expected, sent flying by rocks. A large part of the giant monstrous bird's body was cut in half, and the immortal power Amu had bestowed upon him did not take effect immediately, and his eyes instantly showed horror. Rocks. How can he be so powerful? The sandworm Old Jupiter glanced at Old Mars, who had just arrived and was almost incapacitated, and then burrowed into the ground and disappeared. Rumble rumble. The ground beneath York's feet vibrated, and a giant abyssal maw swallowed the earth beneath him, opening its mouth and engulfing York. Before his vision was completely sealed by teeth, a sneer appeared on York's face. You don't dare to face rocks, so you came for me instead. Perfect. Let me show you. Not everyone can be eaten. Holy white light bloomed from York's body, and tentacles made of light, with magic patterns entwined on their surface, were released from York's palm. Thump. The sandworm Old Jupiter's teeth closed, and the next second his entire body suddenly twisted violently. Rumble rumble. Countless buildings were crushed by his twisting and writhing body. He opened his mouth wide, wanting to spit out York, who he had eaten. But the latter held his hands out to both sides, and countless holy light tentacles, like the sticky webs released by Spider-Man, firmly gripped the inner wall of the sandworm's mouth. As they drilled into his flesh little by little, an extreme pleasure also injected into the sandworm's body. Thunder Bagua. However, just then, a roar simultaneously took both of them by surprise. Kaido swung his thick spiked club, violently striking the sandworm Old Jupiter's neck. The powerful force squeezed and deformed the entire neck of the sandworm. The internal pressure within the sandworm's body suddenly increased as a result, and York, who hadn't completely secured his grip, was forcibly vomited out. York, are you alright? Kaido's concerned voice rang out, and York, who had rolled once after landing and then regained his footing, sighed softly, finally responding with a smile. I'm fine, thank you for the rescue. Kaido grinned, revealing a satisfied smile. He rested his spiked club on his shoulder and turned his head to look at the sandworm Old Jupiter, who was twitching on the ground, and the other 3 giant monsters of various forms. Where did these monsters come from? They're so ugly, but also so powerful. York stood up and explained to Kaido, they are the rumored Gorosei. The highest authority in the world on the surface. What? Kaido was startled. They are the Gorosei. York grinned and asked in return, how does it feel? The feeling of hitting one of the Gorosei just now. Kaido blinked, and the fingers of the hand holding the spiked club moved twice, as if savoring the feeling. Feels good. What is going on? Not long after Kaido arrived, Whitebeard also appeared on the scene. He had actually seen the changes here from afar, but only spoke to York after arriving. So York repeated what he had just told Kaido. These are the Gorosei after activating their devil fruit abilities. The legendary highest authorities in the world. Of course, only on the surface. On the surface. Whitebeard was surprised, he was very good at grasping the key points. York raised his hand and pointed to the military uniform woman in the sky, whose body was evenly divided into 4 pieces and still couldn't reassemble. The fellow possessing that woman is the true king of the world, who has always been hidden in the shadows. Whitebeard's eyes narrowed, and he instantly understood the logic. Is that who Rox wants to kill? York nodded slightly. From Rox's plan, indeed, all his objectives were to kill Amu. Not far away, Rox slowly walked over. It's truly surprising that you 3 are willing to help me. HMPH. It's not about helping, we're just here to witness your demise. York scoffed, but Rox showed no reaction. It was then that he noticed the blood trickling from Rox's ears. Actually, Rox could use life return to heal minor injuries like eardrums, they were nothing in the face of life return. But he stubbornly chose not to heal them. York's expression grew serious again. This guy must have suffered inhuman mental torture. He had followed Garen earlier. Garen had brought the corpse of Rox's deceased wife. But now, he didn't see that woman revived. In addition to the blood flowing from Rox's ears, there were also traces of bloody tears on his cheeks. What kind of story had unfolded here between Garen's arrival and his own? Even if he couldn't pinpoint it, he could roughly imagine. Wahaha. Although there are only 4 of us, we are not without a chance of victory. Rox ignored the strange looks in the eyes of York and the other 2, once again displaying his usual arrogant demeanor. There are 5 enemies in total. That worm is the weakest. I'll leave him to you, Kaido. That bird was crippled by my Murakumogiri, York, you take care of him. That horse is quite strong, Newgate, you handle him. And that last pig, plus the woman in the sky, leave them to me. Kill them all. This world will be ours. After quickly assigning opponents, York, Whitebeard, and Kaido had no objections. It wasn't that they didn't want to speak, but they knew that the current Rox couldn't hear them. On the other side, while Rox was boldly assigning opponents, the other side was actually quite disheveled. Old Jupiter, the sandworm, had been injected with 50 times the pleasure by York's holy light tentacles and was still writhing on the ground. If his lower body hadn't been buried in the earth, one couldn't imagine what kind of filth this place would become. Old Mars, the strange bird, had been largely cut open by Rox and still couldn't close, hanging half limp, appearing completely ruined. The horse bone and the 4-tusked wild boar were still intact, but Amu, above their heads, was also divided into 4 pieces. A quick glance showed that they were truly a collection of the old, the weak, and the disabled. However, they didn't feel themselves at a disadvantage at all. After all, they had their immortal bodies as a foundation. Besides Rox himself, they didn't even care about anyone else on Rox's side. York's ability. If old Jupiter, that fool, hadn't swallowed York, York's ability wouldn't have been able to affect him so easily. And as time passed, with their immortal bodies, they would remain at their peak. The hockey Rox had applied to the military uniform woman and old Mars would eventually dissipate, and their combat power would return to its peak. In contrast, Rox's side would gradually exhaust their stamina, and eventually, everyone would die by their hands. So, in short, this battle was essentially a race against time. If Rox and his allies could completely eliminate the Gorosei in a short amount of time, then Amu would become a lone commander. When they subsequently attacked Holy Land Mary Geoise, it would be much easier, and their chances of victory would be higher. Conversely, everyone on Rox's side would die. The 2 sides thus confronted each other, and the originally terrifying battlefield surprisingly fell into a temporary calm. Until a certain moment, a gentle breeze blew, kicking up some dust that obscured vision, and both sides simultaneously began to move. Kaido transformed into a blue dragon and soared into the sky. He directly abandoned old Jupiter, the sandworm, who was still twisting on the ground, and chose the half-crippled old Mars flying in the air. His dragon mouth opened, and a surging dragon's breath erupted. Seeing this, old Mars also opened his mouth and spewed flames. The flames from both sides collided and compressed in the high sky, as if a second sun had appeared here. Rox and Whitebeard, however, remained unchanged, each charging towards their designated targets. Rox infused his Murakumogiri with ultimate haki and slashed at the four-tusked wild boar. Old Mercury showed no weakness, also rushing towards Rox. His four large tusks transformed into four sharp blades, similarly infused with ultimate conqueror's haki. Their blades collided, and the wild boar was pushed back a step but ultimately withstood Rox's attack. The collision between Whitebeard and Old Jin was similar. Murakumogiri was imbued with vibration power, and the first-generation Kidetsu was imbued with chilling aura. They collided, evenly matched. York, on the other hand, like Kaido, directly abandoned the opponent Rox had assigned to him and instead charged towards the giant sandworm. As the saying goes, strike while the iron is hot. First, completely cripple the weakest, then gradually deal with the stronger, and finally, everyone gangs up on the strongest. This is the strategy with the highest win rate. Fist bone. Crushing fist. York leapt high from the ruins, his right hand clenched into a fist, arm bent and gathering power, his left hand resting on his right arm. At the moment he was about to land on the sandworm, he punched with all his might. The giant sandworm, its consciousness devoured by pleasure and completely defenseless, was instantly blasted into two halves by York's punch. Then, York voluntarily burrowed into the hollow upper half of the sandworm's body, retracted his haki, and furiously punched the inner wall. Aura 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 aura. He landed dozens of punches within a few seconds, increasing the implanted pleasure amplification to several hundred times. Then, before the immortal body could repair itself, he drilled out of the sandworm's body. Old Jupiter was thus completely crippled by York, his combat ability neutralized. At least until this great battle ended, he wouldn't be able to awaken from the vortex of pleasure. Looking up, gazing at the military uniform woman divided into four equal parts in the sky, a hint of curiosity and anticipation emerged in York's eyes. He wanted to test whether his devil fruit ability could remotely affect Imu's main body, who was in Holy Land Mary Geoise. If it could, then the future would be interesting indeed. And as York gazed at the military uniform woman, she was actually looking at York as well. Adolf D. York, a newly born devil fruit ability, never recorded before, worth collecting. York retracted his gaze from the military uniform woman, setting his next target on the monster bird Izumaden, or rather, Old Mars. Among the remaining three Gorosei, he should be the weakest. Where did Garen go? Before the next round of battle, York suddenly remembered this. They had been chasing Garen earlier, but now there wasn't even a shadow of Garen to be seen. He couldn't have deserted, could he? Or, is he lurking? A hint of solemnity flashed in York's eyes. He pretended not to notice anything and charged towards Kaido, who was clashing abilities with Old Mars. Kaido! York roared. The latter glanced over and saw old Jupiter, the sandworm, lying dead on the ground, shriveling and recovering, then shriveling again. Let's team up. York leapt up, jumping onto Kaido's tail which was hanging low in the air. With someone suddenly on him, Kaido felt a slight oddity. But he knew York was here to help him at this moment, so he endured the discomfort. Moving rapidly along Kaido's long dragon body, in a trance, York had the illusion that he had transformed into Dragon Ball's Goku, running on the snake way in hell. A smile naturally curved on his lips. York ran to Kaido's dragon head. Under the latter's slightly displeased gaze and Old Mars' vigilant stare, he stomped hard and leapt high into the air. His right hand clenched into a fist, his arm bent, and his left hand rested on his arm, mimicking Garp's posture, wrapping extreme haki around his fist, and, of course, his devil fruit ability. Brat! Don't you dare succeed! Old Mars let out a furious roar. His body had been largely sliced open by rocks, preventing him from fighting well in close combat, so he opened his mouth and spewed flames towards York. Seeing this, York's face lit up. Without looking back, he shouted at Kaido, Kaido! Breathe fire at me! Kaido was momentarily stunned by the words. Though I don't know why, you asked for this. With that, Kaido also spewed scorching dragon breath. Old Mars spewed first, Kaido spewed second, but Old Mars was further away, and Kaido was closer. The two flame breaths almost perfectly converged. And that convergence point was York, who had already leapt high into the sky. York grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. His plan had succeeded. His left hand, clenched into a fist and propped on his right arm, slammed down with an air cannon. York, almost at his highest jumping point, suddenly shot up another segment. At the moment the flames converged below, his right fist delivered the second punch, which he had been charging until now. Boom! Flames exploded, three forces collided, and the high-temperature flames immediately expanded horizontally in the sky as if hitting a barrier. The raging flames obscured the view below. Kaido didn't understand why York was doing this and was still wondering. Old Mars on the opposite side suddenly reacted. Oh no! Amu-sama! Amidst his exclamation, York, using the recoil from the collision of the three forces, quickly flew towards Amu, who had been suspended high in the air. Amu looked down at York from above. In her eyes, there was no surprise or panic at being ambushed, only a faint remark, boring little tricks. She summoned a magic book with her right hand. The magic book quickly flipped to the designated page, a puff of smoke rose, and a double-barreled shotgun was materialized. Amu grabbed the double-barreled shotgun with her left hand and pulled the trigger at the charging York. Bang! With a gunshot, a man-sized hole immediately appeared in York's abdomen. The latter spat out a large mouthful of blood, muttering internally, as expected of Amu. I used hockey for defense, you know. To put it bluntly, the current York was still a glass cannon. His attack power reached the Admiral-Emperor level, but his physical defense and other aspects could never compare to those of mythical beast monsters. Fortunately, even though he had a large hole in his stomach, he managed to grab one of Imu's legs, thanks to the last bit of upward momentum. The latter looked indifferently at York, who was clutching her ankle, with no hint of concern about being in close proximity. York raised his head, revealing 2 rows of teeth stained red with blood. You're quite arrogant, aren't you? However, Amu responded to him unexpectedly. Mew could have aimed for your head just now. You can just hang there. Mew will take you back to Mary Geoise after the battle, and you will become Emu's collection. Ha ha. York let out a laugh, whether of joy or mockery. The holy light emanating from him suddenly intensified. Garen, hiding in the shadows, let out a soft grunt, silently using armament hockey to neutralize York's ability. Of course, doing so also exposed his hidden position. York glanced in that direction, then no longer paid attention. The sacred light, starting from York hanging on Imu's foot, instantly covered most of the chaotic God Valley. Countless marines and pirates, who were fiercely battling, collectively stiffened, then broke into happy, joyful smiles, tumbling to the ground like dominoes. Hee hee hee, K-mo-ji. After the holy light covered the entire area, York once again released holy light tentacles with magical patterns. Countless tentacles aimed directly at the numerous marines and pirates on the island who had been captured by York's ability. Entwine, absorb. Each person had only a tiny amount of life force drawn, not enough to endanger their health, but when the quantity was sufficient, this life force contributed by countless people quickly healed the large hole in York's abdomen. Bones, blood vessels, internal organs, muscles, and skin regenerated successively. Aside from the large hole in his clothes, York now showed no signs of injury. Amu allowed York to complete all this, a hint of appreciation emerging in her eyes. Indeed, a very excellent ability. Hee hee. York chuckled again, and the hand gripping Imu's ankle suddenly tightened. Crack. The sound of a leg bone being crushed rang out. York pulled upward forcefully, elevating himself to the same height as Amu, then reached out and clutched Imu's half-severed neck. It's useless. Amu remained calm, or perhaps it was a composure that came from looking down on all beings. You've seen Emu's current state. You simply can't kill Mew. Killing you is indeed impossible. York grabbed the neck of Emu's right half with his left hand and the neck of Emu's left half with his right hand. He exerted force with both arms, forcibly piecing them together. Rox's lingering hockey power had left a dividing line, splitting Amu, or rather, the military uniform woman Amu was currently possessing, down the middle. Even when the two halves of the body were forcibly pieced together, there was no sign of them fusing. Amu simply watched York's futile efforts. If the hockey left by rocks were that easy to clear, she would have healed herself long ago. However, York's actions did spark a flicker of curiosity in her. Logically, they were enemies, and York couldn't possibly be thinking of helping her recover her body, unless he intended to pledge allegiance to her. What do you want to do? If you want to pledge allegiance, there's no need to do such meaningless things. This is not meaningless at all. A mischievous grin flashed in York's eyes. In Imu's stunned gaze, he sealed the military uniform woman's red lips with a kiss. Silence. Deathly silence. York's suicidal act caused all the top experts, who were fiercely battling, to involuntarily stop their movements and gaze blankly upwards. 1 second, 10 seconds, half a minute. Finally, Rox was the first to react. He threw his head back and laughed heartily. Whoa-ha-ha-ha-ha. So you have a day like this too. King of the world. Well done. York. You didn't shame me. Whoa-ha-ha. Rox, maniacal laughter broke the silence, but the Gorosei still couldn't believe what was happening before their eyes. Gouge. Old Mercury suddenly roared, transforming from his wild boar form into his human beast form. Decisively and resolutely, he gouged out his own eyes. Although they would certainly regenerate later, at least for this moment, they couldn't have vision. Similarly, apart from old Jupiter and old Saturn, who had already lost control of their bodies, the remaining old Mars and old Jupiter also gouged out their eyes after transforming into their human beast forms. At the same time, Garen, hiding in another corner, still stared blankly at the sky. Master. Master. No, this is military uniform woman's body. Still wrong, it's Master who is controlling military uniform woman's body now. But no matter what, York really kissed her. Garen could even see that York extended his snake head over. And Amu, however, showed no reaction at all, only her pupils widened. Clearly, she was also a bit stunned at this moment. Finally. As the full minute passed, Amu finally reacted. She struck York's chest with a palm, knocking him back, then raised her double-barreled shotgun again, her gaze icy as she pulled the trigger. Bang! A bullet left the barrel, once again piercing York's body. Ha 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 ha. However, York laughed heartily while spitting blood. His goal was achieved. Not only did he indirectly kiss Amu, but he also injected a sufficient amount of happy seeds into military uniform woman's body. For a full minute, he didn't even bother to count, just continuously poured his ability into military uniform woman's body. By now, he actually didn't know how many times it had been enhanced, only that this multiplier was definitely enough to make military uniform woman ecstatic. Assuming that Amu, who was remotely possessing her, could also be affected by the ability, she would probably be in for a rough time. So, to avoid further complications, York snapped his fingers directly while falling through the air, detonating the happy seeds he had just injected. Ah! Military uniform woman, possessed by Amu, suddenly let out a scream, and her body, which had been suspended high in the air, uncontrollably plummeted downwards. Master! The Gorosei exclaimed, immediately surrounding Imu's landing spot, and at the same time, didn't forget to attack York, who was still falling. However, Rox swung his sword, scattering their attacks, and protected York as he pulled away. York used the life force he had previously absorbed and was still stored in his body, not yet dissipated, to quickly heal his injuries. Before long, he once again recovered to his peak state. Compared to him, however, military uniform woman, who had also fallen, showed no movement at all. The three Gorosei once again transformed into their giant beast forms, shielding her behind them, making it impossible to see her current condition. Whoa-ha-ha-ha-ha. Rox continued to laugh wildly. After so many heartbreaking tragedies that had happened to him today, at least there was one thing that made him happy. He had seen Imu's true face up close, and knew what was going on with that guy. Just thinking about that guy's miserable state and twisted expression at this moment, Rox couldn't stop laughing. Wororororo. Kaido's laughter followed closely. You truly live up to your name, York. Although his dream was to bring down all nobles and fight for supremacy on the battlefield together. But at least for now, he didn't have enough guts to do something like York did. And this also made Kaido feel genuine respect for York in his heart. Only a man like this could truly achieve everything he spoke of. Gurararara. Whitebeard also stood by, chuckling softly. He hadn't expected York to be so bold, and that he actually succeeded. This is incredible. However, we might be facing real trouble next. Although York's actions indeed greatly boosted their morale, correspondingly, the enemy's rage would also be pushed to the limit. The fall of that military uniform woman was most likely due to York's devil fruit ability. But York's devil fruit ability wasn't omnipotent, and Whitebeard didn't believe the opponent would be defeated so easily. Whoa-ha-ha-ha-ha. That's enough. Rocks. Laughter finally stopped, and he suddenly uttered this sentence. York. Newgate. Kaido. You've done enough, let's call it a day. What? Kaido was stunned, not understanding what Rocks meant by this. York and Whitebeard's expressions simultaneously darkened. The former had anticipated it, knowing the future, while the latter, based on his understanding of Rocks, knew what he was about to say. You guys leave. With those simple 4 words, Rocks spoke with great relief, but York, Whitebeard, and Kaido all felt a jolt in their hearts. These guys can't be killed, they can always be in peak condition, while our stamina will gradually be depleted. While we're still in good shape, you guys leave quickly, I'll cover your retreat. Kaido expressed his incomprehension, loudly refuting, why? There are only 3 opponents left. If we take them down, we win this battle. We can't win. Rocks, whose eardrums had been repaired at some point, gently shook his head. If it weren't for York's move, perhaps we could have won, but York has completely enraged the opponent. The dignified king of the world, unleashing her true full power, is not something you small fry can handle right now. Kaido opened his mouth, wanting to retort again, but York grabbed his pants leg and pulled him. The former shut up, and the latter turned to Rocks and asked, where's your ambition, Rocks? Is this as far as it goes? Ah, this is as far as it goes. Rocks didn't laugh out loud as he usually did, but answered York calmly and seriously. Perhaps you're right, I overestimated my own abilities, and with a disloyal crew, it's impossible to achieve my ambition. So, Rocks, tone suddenly rose. I've decided to leave you few seeds. To fulfill the dream I couldn't achieve. Now get out. While the opponent's true body hasn't arrived yet, run as far as you can. Rocks swung his sword, and a Haoshoku slash simultaneously struck the 3 of them. However, this slash was not primarily for lethal damage, but mainly for the repelling effect of a cannon blast. York, Whitebeard, and Kaido were blasted far away, and a thoughtful look simultaneously appeared in their eyes. York and Whitebeard exchanged glances, understanding the message contained in the slash, and simultaneously accepted Rock's suggestion to retreat. Hey, Kaido. Let's go. York raised his hand to call Kaido. Although the latter also understood Rock's will, he was still somewhat unwilling. If you're unwilling, then use all your strength to become stronger. Later, I'll take you to kill your way to the true Mary Geoise. You can't even defeat me right now, don't waste the Azure Dragon fruit you just obtained. Ah! Kaido gnashed his teeth in annoyance, smashing the ground with his fist. Finally, he followed York and Whitebeard, fleeing the battlefield without looking back. Garen, hiding in the shadows, watched their retreating figures. He felt a little restless. But he looked at the 3 people over there, then at Rocks over here, and finally decided to join the righteous ganging up, returning to where Shaki and Charlotte Linlin had been earlier. A major battle had also taken place here just now. Apart from Charlotte Linlin and Chong Mianbao, and Gloriosa and Stussy who were not here, almost all other members of the Rock's pirate crew had become corpses on the ground. York simply glanced around, without much unnecessary talk, just one word. Retreat. Before long, the group arrived at a coastline in the eastern part of God Valley. Gloriosa and Stussy, who had been almost entirely invisible throughout the God Valley operation, had already seized a marine warship and were waiting there. Everyone boarded the warship, and York had Kaido use his flame clouds to lift the ship's hull, directly escaping from the sky, away from the island where the great battle was still raging. The surrounding marines naturally wanted to pursue, but Whitebeard directly launched a tsunami with a punch, leaving all the marines no choice but to watch them disappear into the distance. And just as York and his crew successfully retreated, in Holy Land Mary Geoise. Holy Land Mary Geoise. Flower Room. A prolonged, yet alluring feminine scream suddenly echoed through the room. This high-pitched scream lasted for several minutes. It was fortunate that there were no other outsiders in the room, otherwise, some ambiguities and rumors would surely have arisen. A shadowy figure enveloped in a robe slumped onto a newly formed puddle in the room. Her outer robe, which covered her body, trembled slightly, revealing her suppressed rage. Of course, it was also possible that her body was trembling uncontrollably due to some unknown reason. Adolf D. York grit his teeth as he shouted a name. The person shrouded in the robe, however, no longer spoke in the previous feminine voice, but in a magnetic and hateful masculine voice. Amu, I'll remember you. Amu, I will definitely catch you. Several days later. West Blue. A non-affiliated nation seaport. A marine warship, with a large X drawn over its marine flag, was quietly docked in the harbor. Whitebeard, Charlotte Linlin, Chong Mianbao, York, Kaido, Gloriosa, Stussy, Shaki, and a bewildered little Tichu had woken up. Everyone gathered in a tavern in this port city for a farewell banquet. They had eaten and drunk their fill, and the weather was perfect. Whitebeard picked up his travel bag with one hand and Murakumogiri with the other, and was the first to stand up from his chair. It's about time, I'm leaving. York put down his wine glass and looked at Whitebeard, who had stood up. Won't you reconsider? Rox and I are not the same. Gurararara, contending for supremacy is not what I want. All I seek is a family. York glanced at Stussy with a somewhat strange expression. Then why did you reject Stussy back then? If you want a family, a wife and children are the easiest to acquire, aren't they? Hearing this, Stussy glared at York in dissatisfaction. This scoundrel, even at their parting, he still deliberately brought up this matter. Gurararara. Whitebeard grinned. The Rox pirates are too dangerous, I wouldn't dare let my cherished family stay in that pirate crew. As for Stussy, I truly have no feelings for her. You should treat her well from now on. With that, Whitebeard left without any lingering attachment, opened the tavern door, and walked straight out. York pouted. I thought he would say that he pretended not to like you back then for some reason. Stussy reached out and pinched the soft flesh around York's waist, twisting it 180 degrees. Why do you always enjoy playing these games? York grimaced in pain from the twisting, while still chuckling mischievously. Because I'm the victor. Of course, I have to flaunt it in front of the losers. HMPH. Stussy snorted and looked at Gloriosa and Shaki. Strictly speaking, all three of them were forcibly taken by York from others. If this guy hadn't laid hands on married women, she would have really suspected if he had some special fetish. After another round of eating and drinking, this time it was York who took the initiative to stand up. Instead of waiting for you all to leave first and leave us until the end, why don't we hand over the right to cry while staying behind to you all? York grinned. Linlin, Chong Mianbao, were leaving too. Charlotte Linlin rolled her eyes at York while stuffing sweets into her mouth. I wouldn't possibly cry over your departure. Ha 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 ha. York burst into laughter, then led Gloriosa, Stussy, Shaki, Kaido, and the 2-year-old little Teach out of the tavern. Don't just eat sweets all day. Eat more lean meat and vegetables. So you don't lose your figure when you get old. From afar, York's last words drifted back. Charlotte Linlin, who was stuffing sweets into her mouth, sniffled upon hearing this, but ultimately, not a single tear fell. The warship set sail. This ship was seized by Gloriosa and Stussy, so it naturally belonged to York and the others. Besides, Whitebeard was alone, he couldn't possibly control a warship by himself to go out to sea. After the warship left the dock and successfully turned its direction, a seagull selling newspapers suddenly flew onto the ship's rail. Stussy saw it and walked over to buy the latest newspaper with a coin. York was somewhat surprised to see this and asked, World Economic News? Stussy nodded. This is a newly emerging newspaper agency, known for daring to report content that other agencies don't, and for its unique Seagull newspaper delivery service. I estimate that in a few years, this small newspaper agency will likely grow into a giant in the newspaper industry, if it's not acquired beforehand. York nodded lightly. He knew that in the future, this newspaper agency would indeed become the world's #1, and pirates could buy newspapers wherever they sailed. However, what surprised him was that this newspaper agency was founded so early. Morgan's is only 14 or 15 this year, right? He's really amazing. The latest report on God Valley is out. Stussie's single sentence successfully brought York's wandering thoughts back. The latter quickly stepped forward and asked, "What does the newspaper say?" Garp defeated the Rock's pirates and became a marine hero. Stussie concisely explained the newspaper's content in one sentence. York took the newspaper to examine it, and the textual information on it was indeed as she said. A large amount of true information was hidden, and the entire report had the feel of a fabricated story. However, York did notice the photo in the newspaper. This photo captured rocks. However, the rocks in the photo was not the image he was familiar with. Instead, he had devil horns on his head, devil wings and a devil tail on his back, completely demonized. Looking at this photo, York's eyes dimmed slightly. He could roughly guess the development of the battle at God Valley after he and the others left. Imu's true body, or possessing a new target, would descend upon the scene. He would team up with the Gorosei to beat Rocks to near death. Then, he would take control, ordering Rocks to kill everyone on the island who might have seen Imu. Finally, Garp and Roger, who had been happily soloing, were forced to team up, and together they eliminated the demonized Rocks. This conjecture was not entirely accurate, as it was merely York's wishful thinking. Only the Gorosei and Imu, as those involved, knew the true story. Of course, York's conjecture did not mean that the combined strength of Garp and Roger surpassed the strength of Imu possessed her true body plus Gorosei combination. As mentioned before, demonization increases physical size and strength but weakens some combat intelligence. In admiral-level battles, numerical values are certainly important, but a lack of intelligence affects the final outcome of the battle even more. After reading the newspaper and confirming that no other important information could be extracted, York casually handed it to Gloriosa, letting them pass it around. During this process, several wanted posters that had been tucked inside fell lightly onto the warship's deck. York picked up the bounty poster. These were the new bounties for the many survivors of the Rocks pirates after the God Valley incident. Whitebeard, Edward Newgate, 3 billion berries. Golden Lion Shaki, 3 billion berries. Lord of Corruption, Adolph D. York, 3 billion berries. Natural Destroyer, Charlotte Linlin, 2.7 billion berries. Gourmet Knight, Chong Mianbao, 1.05 billion berries. World's Most Beautiful Woman, Shaki, 999.9 million berries. Former Pirate Empress, Gloriosa, 700 million berries. Science Bandit, Buckingham Stussy, 660 million berries. Azure Dragon, Kaido, 540 million berries. Pirate Guru, Wang Ji, 530 million berries. York read out the bounty amounts and new titles for all the surviving members of the Rocks pirates one by one. Most of them couldn't help but whistle in delight upon hearing this. Not bad. York, your title has been upgraded from Corrupt Succubus to Lord of Corruption, and your bounty has also risen to the same level as Newgate and Shaki. It seems that your kiss with the World King was quite impactful. York had informed them of her achievements at God Valley during their casual conversations after they regrouped. How did Shaki's bounty suddenly get so high? She's the one who triggered the God Valley incident. Gloriosa clicked her tongue, saying somewhat sourly, to almost cause the collapse of world order with beauty, throughout history, it's probably only been you. Shaki gave an awkward yet polite smile. If I could, I'd wish I looked a bit more ordinary right now. Wang Ji's bounty increased so little, only 20 million berries. Kaido narrowed his eyes, noticing a blind spot in the new bounties. Although Wang Ji didn't directly participate in the God Valley incident, simply by occupying Hashinosu Island after the battle, his bounty theoretically shouldn't have only increased by 20 million berries. Heh, Shaki knows what's going on. York's face showed a cold smile, and killing intent towards Wang Ji surged in her eyes. She looked at Shaki and said, "It was Wang Ji, wasn't it, who colluded with the world government, killed Malone, and captured you?" Shaki nodded slightly, and anger also surged in her eyes. That's right. It was him. She would never forget Wang Ji's despicable, triumphant smile that night, even if she died. Should we go to Hashinosu Island? Gloriosa's words were concise. Let's go kill that fool. Upon hearing this, everyone's gaze immediately fixed on York. York pondered for a moment, then shook her head. Not yet. The world government probably expects us to seek revenge on Wang Ji, and they might have set a trap for us on Hashinosu Island. The World King's wrath won't diminish just because we ultimately won the God Valley incident. She probably wants to skin me alive and slice me into 1,000 pieces right now. So, it's not wise for us to show ourselves now. We should lay low for a while. Everyone nodded in understanding. Then Gloriosa asked, speaking of laying low, do you have a good place in mind? Of course. York grinned, and Sky Island and Shandora naturally flashed through her mind. When it came to seclusion, there was no better place. And in this era, she might even find the Guro Guro no Mi before someone else ate it. But before we go there, we need to make a trip to the South Blue. South Blue. Everyone was puzzled. York explained, I took 3 kids as crewmates at God Valley. They're most likely in the Sorbet Kingdom in the South Blue right now. Those 3 kids have excellent talent and abilities. Saying this, York looked at Teach. Besides, we really should find some playmates around Teach's age now. Everyone's gaze shifted to Teach, showing expressions of pity and agreement. This child had lost both his mother and father in a single day and still hadn't emerged from his grief. It was indeed time to find him some playmates to distract him. And so, Stussy, who was currently serving as the navigator on the ship, pulled out a West Blue map and directed everyone to steer the battleship towards the red line in the West Blue. The seas of the pirate world were divided into 4 parts by the Red Line and the Grand Line. On the other side of the Red Line separating the West Blue was the South Blue. If they traveled normally, York and her crew would first have to go to the reverse mountain waterway in the West Blue, and then transfer to the South Blue waterway to enter the South Blue. But then again, Kaido was also York's crewmate. The flame clouds released by the Azure Dragon could allow the ship to pass directly through the air, thus making the Red Line no longer an obstacle. York and her crew's route would no longer be restricted by conventional routes. The Marine trying to block people at certain so-called essential passages would only be a waste of effort. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. The area of the West Blue was much larger than the Grand Line. To this day, York and her crew still hadn't seen a trace of the Red Line in the West Blue. And they had also encountered a sea storm. Although the 4 seas east, west, south, north were calmer than the Grand Line, they weren't truly as still as a pond. All the usual sea weather conditions were present. After emerging from the storm, Stussy noted that their course had deviated slightly. Then, while correcting their course, they stumbled upon an island with towering giant trees. The canopy of the giant trees on the island almost covered half the island, looking much like the World Tree of Elbaf. Of course, compared to the treasure tree Atom of Elbaf, which could support the giant race, its size was still considerably smaller. It's Ohara, the holy land of archaeology. Stussy provided information about the island ahead, then turned to ask York, should we dock? York narrowed her eyes. Ohara wasn't on their original route, but it appeared after they experienced a sea storm. This coincidence was too much of a coincidence, just like what Rox had told her before God Valley. An invisible force was manipulating their destiny. World will. As a modern person, she didn't believe in such things. But she had already transmigrated, and had directly used her will to distort reality and obtain a devil fruit, plus she didn't have a system. For something that may or may not exist, York felt she should still believe in it. Of course, she definitely didn't submit to fate. The education she received in her previous life was that people must have a heart that defies heaven, otherwise, what was the difference between them and pigs and sheep in a pen? However, she had originally planned to visit Ohara, though not at this moment. But since the world will had brought her here, there was no need to deliberately go out of her way. Let's go to the island and take a look. The legendary Holy Land of Archaeology and the Tree of Omniscience are said to store the most books in the world, including many rare editions. Many of these books should contain content that can help us in the future. There's no need to miss it. The warship slowly approached Ohara, and the people on the island barely reacted at all. It wasn't until the ship docked and York and his group successfully landed that some people belatedly realized what was happening. This doesn't look like a normal warship. It's pirates. Pirates are here. It's the remnants of the Rock's pirate crew. Oh my god. So many people have come. It's over, Ohara is going to be destroyed. The residents of the island town were in a panic. Because of the God Valley incident, almost everyone now knew that the remnants of the Rock's pirate crew were in the West Blue. This was also an important reason why York and the others were recognized. Sigh, what a bother. York let out a soft sigh. He had intended to act discreetly, but the residents here were really clueless. A sacred white light was released from him, and many residents who were scurrying about in the streets froze, then fell to the ground, falling into a deep sleep. The joy of sleep. After all, acting discreetly and not making a big fuss was not York's goal, so he did not use his usual abilities. Thud, thud. One after another, the town residents fell, and York and his group smoothly passed through the town. Then their target was directly the base of the large tree in the center of the island. Before long, York and his group arrived at the bottom of the legendary Tree of Omniscience. The scholars who had already received the news gathered, blocking the entrance to the Tree of Omniscience. Leading them was an old man whose hairstyle and beard combined looked like a clover. He stepped forward and questioned York, who had turned off his ability after leaving the town. Pirates. This is a temple of knowledge, and there are no treasures you seek. What do you intend to do here? If you are here to destroy this island, we will immediately notify the nearby marine branch. York raised an eyebrow. So you haven't notified them yet. As expected of scholars, your minds are much more flexible than those foolish fellows in the town. After a slight pause, York explained, we are not here to seek war. As the saying goes, within books, there are beauties like jade, within books, there are houses of gold. We are here to seek the treasure of knowledge. Dr. Clover was slightly surprised. It was his first time hearing that pirates would also be interested in knowledge. Enough small talk, we plan to borrow books from your library for a period of time. During this period, if you don't make a fuss, everyone will be happy, and we will leave once our needs are met. But if you insist on being righteous and unwilling to let us borrow, and even notify the Marines, then I will have no choice but to destroy this island. York raised his hand, releasing a tentacle of holy light from his palm. At a speed that Dr. Clover could not react to at all, it quickly touched and bound a male scholar. This male scholar had no room to struggle, instantly falling into a whirlpool of joy, a foolish smile appearing on his face, as he slowly slumped to the ground. The scholars let out a gasp, and Dr. Clover's expression also became completely solemn. Are you sure you can do what you say? To be precise, you have no choice. York's lips curved into a faint smile. It's either destruction or cooperation, you can only choose one. Dr. Clover pondered for a moment, then actively cleared the way. The ocean of knowledge is open to everyone. Even pirates are no exception. However, I also hope you can abide by some of the library's rules and not damage the books at will. Otherwise, even at the risk of the entire library being destroyed, I will never let you stay on this island. York nodded lightly. That is natural. The two sides reached an agreement, and York and his group successfully settled into the Tree of Omniscience library, beginning a life of reading and studying. During this process, the library's manager, also the leader of the scholars, Dr. Clover, personally went to greet the mayor of the island town. He asked them to turn a blind eye and not report, otherwise, everyone on the island would suffer. The mayor nodded repeatedly. York's bounty of 3 billion berries, and the fact that everyone else also had bounties of over 500 million, played a huge role at this moment. Just seeing these amounts, the residents could clearly recognize the huge gap between them and York's group. And so, York and his group successfully set up camp on this island. In a flash, several days passed. Kaido was the first to get tired of reading and went alone to the back mountain to train his physique and devil fruit ability. York instructed him not to leave this island, not to harm the island's residents, and besides that, he could do whatever he wanted, then he no longer bothered with him. The monotonous, but actually enjoyable reading life passed for a few more days, and York noticed a familiar figure on the island. To be precise, this person had been watching them with a wary gaze since their first day on the island. However, he hadn't taken any action, so York hadn't paid him any mind. Until today, York finally inadvertently remembered that this person's appearance seemed somewhat similar to Garp's son. Then, recalling that in the original story, after Ohara was destroyed, Garp's son had personally come here and had definitively established his will to create the revolutionary army here. And so, that evening, York stopped the young man. Monkey D. Dragon, Garp's son, is that you? The latter, who had been intercepted, showed a flicker of surprise on his face, but quickly calmed down. How did you know? York had only been bluffing, not expecting it to be true, and immediately laughed, because your appearance is somewhat similar to Garp's, and also, there is no fear in your eyes towards me, ordinary people couldn't achieve your level. Dragon's face became serious, and he asked in a deep voice, so, are you planning to deal with me here? Why would I do that? York chuckled. But I am indeed curious why you, as Garp's son, would appear here. Logically speaking, Garp's hometown is in the East Blue. You're neither in your hometown in the East Blue, nor at Marineford with your old man, but instead, you're alone in O'Hara in the West Blue. York looked Dragon up and down, scrutinizing his attire. He wore simple cloth clothes, but had a hood on, and had been dressed this way for all these days. While it couldn't be confirmed that he was hiding his identity, there was likely some intention of it. Dragon was silent for a moment. He knew that if he didn't satisfy the other party's curiosity, he certainly wouldn't be allowed to leave easily. So he said in a deep voice, I hid here from God Valley. York instantly realized, a deserter. No. If it were just deserting in battle, with your old man's current position in the Marine, it would be a matter of a single word. So, you actually attacked the celestial dragons on the island, didn't you? Dragon didn't expect York to be so sharp, seeing through his biggest secret at a glance. Dragon immediately fell silent. York chuckled, not expecting his casual guess, based on information from his previous life, to be spot on. On that island, you couldn't stand the celestial dragons slaughtering civilians, so you angrily struck out at them. Because of this, you completely cut yourself off from the Marine, with no place left for you within them. Afterward, to escape pursuit, you hid on O'Hara, planning to wait for things to blow over before finding an opportunity to go elsewhere. But you didn't expect that we would also arrive on this island after you. Then, your sense of justice, as a former Marine, compelled you to actively monitor me, until I stopped you just now. Is this your experience from God Valley until now? Dragon looked at York with a strange expression. Can your devil fruit ability also read minds? Ha 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 ha, of course not. York grinned. It's merely a deduction based on information. Of course, the core of this deduction still came from York's anime and manga information from his previous life. A person capable of establishing the Revolutionary Army, if he appeared in God Valley, would almost certainly act against the celestial dragons who were slaughtering civilians. Then, combined with the current information, it was naturally easy to deduce Dragon's trajectory. Dragon fell silent once more. He felt as if he had no secrets in front of York, as if his entire being had been seen through. Yet, he knew almost nothing about York. This unknown shadow loomed over his heart, leaving him unsure how to respond. York watched the changes in Dragon's expression, and a thought suddenly emerged in his mind. You probably have nowhere to go now, right? Dragon offered no reply. York continued to ask, unprompted, do you want to join my pirate crew? Dragon remained silent. Having struck out at the celestial dragons, let alone returning to be a Marine, even switching to a bounty hunter probably won't work for you. The choices you can make next are only a few. 1. Return to your old home in the East Blue and live in seclusion until old age. 2. Switch to being a pirate, which is my current suggestion. 3. Join the underworld, engage in mafia activities, or similar unsavory professions. 4. York smiled faintly. You probably think I'm also the kind of pirate who burns, kills, and plunders, right? That's normal. After all, my devil fruit ability can easily cause misunderstandings. But, I have a great dream. York deliberately paused, putting away all his smiles, and said to Dragon seriously and sincerely, I want to overthrow all the old nobles. And establish a more just new order. This might sound rather empty to you, so let me put it another way. I want to make sure everyone in the world can eat their fill. Pausing again, York offered a further explanation. Fairness is not achieved overnight, and an ideal world is not built in a day. First, abolish slavery and guarantee the basic human rights of all people. Then, abolish the old noble class and open up channels for upward and downward mobility. And then, increase food production to ensure everyone can eat their fill. This is what I want to do. As for the truly fair and equal world in my ideal, that is a task left to future generations. Taking too big a step at once can lead to problems, so I've decided to only take 3 steps. York extended his right hand with a grand expression. How about it? Consider it. Do you want to come and help me? Dragon looked at York with a strange expression. Hearing a pirate talk about establishing an ideal world, this feeling was truly peculiar. Since when did this world need a pirate to save it? But on second thought, it seemed that apart from pirates, there really weren't many people in this world who would have such an idea. And then, considering his current predicament of having nowhere to go, Dragon couldn't help but feel a stir in his heart. Although what York said conflicted with the ideals of justice and peace he had learned since childhood, his theory was indeed highly feasible, at least it didn't seem so out of reach. The words of agreement were already on his lips, but new concerns emerged in Dragon's heart. What if York was deceiving him? Lying and betrayal were everyday occurrences for pirates. Thinking of this, Dragon immediately changed his approach. I indeed have nowhere to go right now, and your ideal sounds very appealing. But, you are a pirate. I cannot trust you yet. You need to show me with your actions. Only then will I truly acknowledge you. York smiled, hearing this, and placed his outstretched hand on Dragon's shoulder. Then please wait and see. That night, York invited all his current crew members to a banquet at the town tavern. At the banquet, he not only announced the addition of Dragon as a new member but also declared his ideal. Everyone was excited upon hearing this. Only the town residents drinking in the same tavern showed disdain. A mere pirate, to actually have such a noble ideal, it's simply laughable. York was unconcerned by this. Because he always held a belief. Things needed to be shown through actions, not just by shouting slogans. Of course, occasionally drawing a grand vision was also necessary. So, when most of the other people in the tavern had dispersed, he took out the devil fruits he had obtained from God Valley earlier. There were 9 in total. 1 was given to Kuma, 1 to Kaido, and 2 were given to Whitebeard and Charlotte Linlin respectively, leaving 5 remaining. They were Paramesha type barrier fruit, Paramesha type mirror fruit, Zone type bird fruit mythical zone phoenix form, Logia type dark fruit, and Logia type hurricane fruit. These 5 devil fruits, if anyone wants one, come and claim it. As founding members of our pirate crew, you deserve this reward. Upon hearing this, everyone was somewhat tempted, but no one actually moved. Kaido was the first to state, I already have the Azure Dragon fruit. Meaning he couldn't eat a second one. Gloriosa shook her head after him. I don't want to eat a devil fruit, I still want to take baths. Shaki nodded in agreement, I also prefer taking baths, I don't want to eat a devil fruit. York's gaze fell on Stussy. The latter looked hesitant. She also liked taking baths, but all the fruits present were top tier, and she was indeed a bit tempted. Under York's encouraging gaze, she reached for the 5 fruits. Her hand first hovered over the phoenix fruit, then quickly moved to the hurricane fruit, and finally wavered between the mirror fruit and the hurricane fruit. In the very end, Stussy finally made her choice, her tender white hand grasping the Paramesha type mirror fruit. York was slightly surprised at the sight. Are you sure you want this one? Stussy gritted her teeth and nodded. I'm not good at direct combat. While mythical zone and Logia types can enhance my direct combat ability, they won't improve my existing strengths. So I've decided to move into logistics. Saying this, Stussy smiled, pursing her lips. Besides, this devil fruit is so crucial, if someone else ate it, you probably wouldn't feel at ease either, York. York chuckled at her words, pulled Stussy into his arms, and gently kissed her forehead. I'm sorry to put you through this, making such a sacrifice. The disgusting taste of the devil fruit made Stussy frown slightly, but she still forced herself to eat the entire mirror fruit, enduring the nausea. York turned his head to look at Dragon. Aren't you going to pick one? Dragon was startled. Me. He was a little flustered, not having expected it. I just joined, and York didn't give him a chance to continue, directly grabbing the Logia-type hurricane fruit and tossing it to him. Are you looking down on me? York's tone suddenly became arrogant and confident. From the moment you agreed to join my pirate crew, you were already my companion. For my companions, I will give ample trust. As for what you said earlier, if I couldn't fulfill my promises, you would leave my side. If I can't even fulfill my own promises, being abandoned by everyone is only natural. Now, as the captain, I order you. Eat that devil fruit. Dragon fumbled to catch the hurricane fruit York threw to him, and listening to his words, he fell silent. He looked at York's confident smile. This man's magnanimity exceeded his imagination. Not only did he generously take in a stray like him, but he also unhesitatingly gifted him a top-tier devil fruit. Such selflessness, full of trust, and confident in completely winning him over, Dragon had never seen in his life. It must be said that Dragon truly felt a desire to die for York at this moment. His eyes flickered, and after a long internal struggle, Dragon said in a deep voice, "Captain York. Let's drink the Sworn Brotherhood wine." York raised an eyebrow and smiled at Dragon. "Are you sure? Once you drink the Sworn Brotherhood wine, it won't be as easy to leave as you might think." Dragon nodded gently. "I've thought it through. Having just joined the pirate crew, I haven't made any contributions, yet the captain has given me such a top-tier devil fruit. The only thing I can repay the captain with is loyalty." York's expression became solemn upon hearing this. He knew very well that Dragon's words sounded good, but if his future actions didn't meet Dragon's expectations, Dragon could still leave at any time. Of course, with the binding of the Sworn Brotherhood wine, given Dragon's character, he would certainly pay the corresponding price before leaving. Similarly, Kaido was actually the same. These individuals with Haoshoku all had their own wills. If he couldn't win them over psychologically, they would eventually seek their own paths. "Alright, since you're so insistent, then drink it. Kaido, you too." The Sworn Brotherhood wine in the pirate world didn't have as many elaborate rituals as the gang Sworn Brotherhoods in York's previous life, but it had all the necessary elements. A large wine bowl, and each person preparing to swear brotherhood had to drip a drop of blood into it. This time, there were only York, Kaido, and Dragon, so the wine bowl didn't need to be too big. Any large bowl from the tavern's back kitchen would suffice. The key was that the blood-infused wine needed to be divided into 3, ensuring each person received a bowl. Then came the witnesses. A minimum of 1 person, with no upper limit. This task could be handled by Shaki, Stussy, and Gloriosa. Finally, after making an oath of eternal loyalty and drinking the blood wine, they also needed to smear their blood on a gold coin and throw it into the sea, thereby requesting the approval of the legendary great pirate Davy D. Jones. And so, the entire Sworn Brotherhood ceremony was completed. From now on, whether it was Dragon or Kaido, if they wanted to leave York's pirate crew, they would have to go through a similar ceremony again. Otherwise, York would have the right to sever their limbs. If they were unwilling to even have their limbs severed, then they would have to endure York's endless pursuit. Theoretically, their newly joined pirate crew would not have the right to protect them in this matter. Of course, all of the above were mainly moral and righteous constraints, aimed at people who valued morality and righteousness. If, like Blackbeard in the original timeline, one neither cared about morality nor righteousness, then the binding force would be almost zero. It would purely depend on who was stronger. Back in the tavern, it was only now that Dragon truly regarded the hurricane fruit as his own, opening his mouth and biting into it. Seeing Dragon eat the fruit, York turned his head to look at little Teach. He had originally intended to give Teach the dark fruit directly at this opportunity. But the boy, perhaps because he was still too young, had simply fallen asleep. Never mind, a few more years, this kid is still too young now, he might not appreciate my good intentions. By the way, Captain York, what is our pirate crew called? After completing the Sworn Brotherhood, Dragon no longer had a psychological burden calling York Captain, and couldn't help but curiously ask about the pirate crew's name. Everyone else, hearing this, also couldn't help but cast curious glances at York. Indeed, they still didn't know the name of their pirate crew. Our pirate crew doesn't have a name yet, but I suggest, why not call it the Fallen Pirate Crew? Gloriosa suggested with a smile. York's title is Lord of the Fallen, so Fallen Pirate Crew fits perfectly. Shaki agreed. I think it's good. Stussy also expressed approval. I think it works too. Kaido, however, had a different opinion. Worororo, I prefer the Evil Pirate Crew. Seeing this, Dragon also offered his suggestion. How about the Paladin pirate crew? York's ideal isn't just to be a villain. Since we want to feed everyone in the world, we need a nicer name, not one that immediately gives off an evil aura. York nodded gently upon hearing this. Dragon makes a good point. However, Paladin pirate crew feels a bit inferior compared to the celestial dragons gods knights. So I've decided, the name of our pirate crew will be the Red Flag Pirates. With that, York pulled out the pirate flag he had prepared long ago from his embrace. A pure red flag, with a skull in the center, surrounded by rice and wheat ears on either side. Red flag. Hearing York's words, everyone's faces couldn't help but show a hint of confusion. It doesn't sound very imposing. Sounds like a name for a small fry pirate crew. Does it have any special meaning? York couldn't help but twitch his mouth. These people truly didn't understand his romance. So he offered another reason. When the red flag fills the world, we'll trample the Holy Land and admire the cherry blossoms. In the future, I don't plan to take the elite route of a pirate crew with only a dozen people. I'm going for the conquest route. Therefore, the importance of the flag is greater than the name of the pirate crew. Imagine, in the future, the entire world raising the red flag. And the enemies of the red flag will be the Marine and the world government, flying white flags. As York spoke, corresponding images appeared in everyone's minds. It feels like it's actually pretty good. Although the name sounds ordinary, as long as we're strong enough in the future, it actually makes no difference. Well, you're the captain, so you call the shots. Since the flag is already made, our opinions probably don't matter anymore. And so, everyone smoothly accepted the name Red Flag Pirates, and the Red Flag Pirates were officially announced to be established in the Tavern of O'Hara. The next day, Stussy, accompanied by York, came to the mirror shop in O'Hara and touched every mirror. The Paramesha-type mirror fruit's ability is divided into two parts. One part is to create mirrors and use their reflective ability to deceive. The second part is the mirror world. Although the former ability is quite practical, compared to the latter, it is somewhat insignificant. An independent and stable space, and through this space, one can travel to any previously marked location. The strategic value of this ability is extremely high. For the second part of the ability to achieve its highest value, the primary prerequisite is to touch a large number of mirrors. Mirrors that can connect to the mirror world do not automatically become effective within a certain range of the ability user, they require the ability user to mark them through direct touch. It's troublesome, but in return, once a mirror is touched and marked, in the future, it can be used for ultra-long distance displacement through the mirror world, regardless of distance or location. Theoretically, as long as the mirrors Stussy touched in O'Hara today are not all shattered, even if they enter the Grand Line in the future, through the mirror world, it would only take a few steps to instantly cross tens of thousands of kilometers and arrive back in O'Hara. In addition to this, with the mirror world, some high-value items can also be stored within it. Although it doesn't have the time-freezing effect of a system backpack, at least they no longer need to carry a large bag around every day. In a flash, York and his group stayed in O'Hara for a full month. During this month, they read a large number of books. This included, but was not limited to, devil fruit encyclopedias, various animal and plant science knowledge, and various books on sea survival. Sigh, so many books, it would take too much time to read them all. York put down the book in his hand, looked up at the ocean like countless books in the Tree of Omniscience library, and sighed softly. We've stayed here long enough, it's almost time to leave. Kaido was the first to get excited when he heard this. Finally, we can leave this boring place. He. York smiled faintly. For someone like Kaido who doesn't like reading, this place was indeed quite tortuous. So, after a simple resupply, York and his crew left O'Hara. The warship set sail. The flag was replaced with the red pirate crew flag made by York, while the sails, due to their large area, were still difficult to change for the time being. Looking at the receding figure of the warship, Dr. Clover let out a slight sigh of relief. They're finally gone. Heaven knows how much psychological pressure they had been under for the past month. But these pirates were quite trustworthy, we didn't report them, and they really didn't harm us. Back to York's side. After departing from O'Hara, he replanned the navigation route. Although they were still generally heading towards the red line in the west blue, they would proactively stop at any islands along the way. For no other reason than for Stussy to enter the mirror shops on the islands and touch every mirror sold there. These mirrors might not be useful now, but who can guarantee they won't be useful in the future? It's better to be prepared than unprepared. Just like that, another week passed, and they finally arrived in front of the red line in the west blue. Looking at the wall of size in the distance, York had Kaido use his ability to fly over this daunting red line from the sky. They successfully entered the south blue. The route here was the same as in the west blue, they stopped at every island they passed. Finally, 1 month after departing from Ohara, they successfully reached their first stage destination, the Sorbet Kingdom. The warship docked, and they disembarked. York directly ignored the prosperous areas of the island and headed towards the slum on the other side of the island. Here, they found a church and successfully saw the trio of Kuma, Ginny, and Ivankov inside. Yo! Long time no see, brats. A strange yet familiar voice suddenly rang out from the church entrance, causing the three little ones chatting inside the church to collectively stiffen. It's you. From God Valley. Ivankov had a good memory and recognized York immediately. But because of this, he was even more shocked. How did you find this place? That's none of your business. In any case, we've met again, so shouldn't you fulfill the promise you made back in God Valley? York smiled faintly as he looked at the three little ones. Don't think I'll let you off easily after you ate my devil fruit, oh. Ivankov, Kuma, and Ginny all collectively swallowed hard. KK knew it. We will fulfill our promise. They had all read the newspapers about the God Valley incident. Although the newspapers didn't explicitly state what happened to that island afterward, the bounty posters issued by the Marine wouldn't lie. This man in front of them was a top-tier great pirate with a bounty of 3 billion berries. It would have been fine if he hadn't found them, but now that he had, they knew they would never escape from him. So, they chose not to resist and surrendered very decisively. After successfully taking in the three little ones, York suddenly became interested in the Sorbet Kingdom. He looked at his crew. Guys, our pirate crew has been established for a while now, but it seems we haven't genuinely acted like pirates yet, have we? How about we officially start our business today? Upon hearing this, Dragon nervously asked York. What is Captain planning to do? It's very simple. York grinned, giving a ferocious answer. Overthrow this country. Kill all the royalty and old nobles of this country. Grant the common people of this country a new order. As soon as these words were spoken, Kaido's eyes instantly lit up. This was something he liked. Dragon, slightly uneasy, retorted, won't that be too cruel? We don't know if the royalty of this country is incompetent, it wouldn't be good if we accidentally killed the wrong people. York didn't immediately refute but instead looked at the Ivankov trio. You've lived in this country for a while, right? How are the king and nobles of this country? Are they good king and good nobles? Kuma and Ginny were hesitant to speak, or perhaps they didn't pay much attention to such matters. Finally, Ivankov answered York's question. The king is fine, but the nobles are a bunch of fools. Through Ivankov's narration, York and the others learned that the king of this country, although not very capable, was indeed a kind-hearted king who was willing to be good to his people. Otherwise, Kuma and his friends wouldn't have been able to move back into the church his father once established so quickly. However, in contrast, the nobles of this country were all very cruel. They despised the common people and occupied almost all the fertile land in the entire country, even the king could barely stand tall in front of them. In fact, to make money, they would rather watch the people starve than sell grain to them, just to seize the last bit of barren land from the people. After hearing Ivankov's description, York looked at his companions. Guys, what do you say? Should we do this job? 2 streams of white air puffed out from Kaido's nostrils. Let's do it. Whether it's the king or the nobles. Kill them all. I feel like the king is actually quite nice. How about we only target the nobles? Dragon offered a different opinion. York looked at Gloriosa, Stussy, and Shaki, who hadn't spoken. What do you all say? The 3 women collectively shrugged. You decide. York grinned, looked at Kaido, then at Dragon, and finally said, I'm not planning to occupy this country for now, so let's leave the king alone for the time being. Otherwise, the country's order will completely collapse. I've decided. We will carry out a major purge of the nobles in this country. Kill everyone. Steal all their treasures. All right. Kaido responded loudly. Although this didn't meet his expectations, it was only the beginning. There were many more countries and islands waiting for them to destroy and occupy. And so, the group split into several paths, each responsible for one direction, threatening the island's residents to act as guides, and began a massacre of the Sorbet Kingdom's nobles. Initially, these guiding residents were hesitant, afraid that York and his pirate crew wouldn't be able to defeat the nobles' guards, which would then implicate them and cost them their lives. However, when York and his pirate crew truly wiped out an entire noble family, these long-oppressed residents suddenly seemed to have a switch flipped. They no longer feared anything and eagerly led York and his pirate crew on. Pirate masters, follow me. That noble's estate is on the hill just ahead. I used to work as a helper in their house, they're incredibly rich. Guided by an old man, York entered a noble's estate. Before long, joyful screams rose and fell, as the unsuspecting noble family all fell victim to York's ability. However, after York controlled the people in the estate, the old man went straight to stripping the lady of the estate's clothes. Anyway, the pirates did it, no one will trace it back to me. York's eyes narrowed slightly, and he directly released a holy light tentacle, piercing through the old man's body. The old man's chest was pierced, and he spat out large mouthfuls of blood, looking at York with disbelief. Why? Didn't like it. There was no grand reason, he simply didn't like it. Of course, there was also a slight annoyance at being used. At the same time, the other members of the Red Flag Pirates encountered similar situations. However, everyone's approach was different. Kaido and Gloriosa both decisively eliminated the people. Shaki, on the other hand, directly captivated the other party with her beauty. In fact, it wasn't just the people leading the way, even the nobles she needed to kill were directly captivated by her face. They willingly opened their doors to Shaki and offered her the wealth they had accumulated over many years. Precisely because of this, Shaki didn't kill them and even arranged for them to move their wealth into a mirror. Stussy, in the mirror world on the other side of the mirror, quickly transported these treasures that were moved in using her ability. Finally, Dragon was a bit more complicated. He first appealed to their emotions and reasoned with them, using words to persuade them not to do such things. However, the other party scoffed at Dragon, "You can do it. Why can't I? At worst, I'll join your pirate crew afterward." At these words, Dragon's face completely darkened, and he ruthlessly eliminated the person who had led him. But after eliminating him, when he turned to face the nobles he was responsible for clearing out, he again felt a pang of compassion. He only killed the adult nobles but spared the underage descendants. His justification was, children are innocent, they shouldn't bear the sins of the previous generation. And among the children Dragon spared along the way, one of them was named Bakori. He was the next king in the original timeline who would usurp the current king in the future, splitting the entire Sorbet kingdom in two, leading to Kuma's solitary revolution, and later being slandered by the world government as a tyrant, the main culprit. In a blink of an eye, several days passed. The purge of the entire Sorbet kingdom's nobility finally concluded. York and the others regrouped and reported their respective results. Gloriosa and Kaido were similar to York, they all carried out a thorough eradication. Shaki barely killed anyone throughout, but she extracted all the money, including some scattered private stashes hidden in nooks and crannies, all of which were contributed. Dragon hesitated briefly but still mentioned that he only killed adults and spared the children. After hearing everyone's reports, York was pensive. In fact, this operation in the Sorbet kingdom was primarily a test for his companions. To observe their modus operandi and their operational philosophy. How much money they stole or whether they could completely clear out the nobles was secondary. And after this test, York finally drew a conclusion. Shaki would be best suited as a decorative figure in the future, or perhaps she could debut as a legitimate idol, responsible for earning the wealth of the rich. As for Dragon, his concept hadn't shifted yet, he didn't understand the great danger of not eradicating the roots. But it didn't matter, a few lessons would slowly teach him to be more astute. Kaido and Gloriosa were currently the two who could perfectly execute York's orders. In the future, they could be assigned more tasks regarding the conquest of islands. Having clarified these points, York officially declared the operation over. Everyone re-boarded the warship, hoisted the sails, and set off. Not far away, several marine warships that had already arrived watched them depart from a distance, with no intention of approaching or firing cannons. In fact, they had been notified on the very day York and the others began their slaughter and had arrived at the Sorbet Kingdom the next day. Unfortunately, they simply didn't have the courage to face the red flag pirates, whose lowest bounty exceeded 500 million berries, so they could only land on the island after the incident and ask the locals what had happened. Returning to York's side. After leaving the Sorbet Kingdom, they entered Stussy's mirror world. Looking at the treasures piled up like small mountains in the mirror world, York couldn't help but ask, how much money did we steal in total this time? Stussy smiled with pursed lips. I'm not sure, but based on my experience, there must be at least 8 billion to 10 billion berries. Dragon and the three little ones, Ivankov, Rue, and Jin, all gasped in unison at these words. That much. The heavenly tribute doesn't seem to be that much either. Dragon suddenly gritted his teeth. These corrupt old nobles. They all deserve to die. For the first time, he truly felt that the reason the common people suffered was not because the country lacked wealth, but because the vast majority of the wealth was concentrated in the hands of the old nobles. And these old nobles, rather than sharing even a little with the poor, would rather take their wealth to their graves. York looked at the indignant dragon at this moment and smiled calmly. No need to be angry about such things. This is the norm in this world, and we'll see much more of it in the future. Marineford, Marine Headquarters. Since the collapse of the Rocks pirates, the workload of the Marines had not actually decreased much. In fact, it had become even busier as former Rocks pirates members each established new pirate crews. Report. A messenger suddenly appeared outside Admiral Kong's office. Come in. Kong, who is currently in a meeting with Sengoku, Garp, and Suru, heard this and generously allowed the messenger to enter and report. Reporting, Admiral Kong. Vice Admiral Garp. Vice Admiral Sengoku. Vice Admiral Suru. The messenger, with an excited expression, greeted the high-ranking officers, especially Garp, his eyes full of fervor and admiration. The latter gave an awkward laugh. As the target of the world government's propaganda, Garp was actually not very satisfied with his current status. However, he had no way to tell others the truth about God Valley, so he could only reluctantly accept the title of Marine Hero. After the greetings, the messenger officially began his report. Admiral Kong, the pirate you specifically ordered us to pay extra attention to, Adolph D. York, has appeared in the South Blue. They appeared in the Sorbet Kingdom in the South Blue, massacred a large number of local nobles, plundered a vast amount of wealth, and the entire Sorbet Kingdom has fallen into chaos because of it. That is a brief overview. Here is the detailed intelligence. With that, the messenger handed a document to Kong. Kong took it and examined it, his already stern expression becoming even more grim. He said nothing, only turned his head and handed the document to Garp. Garp, take a look. The latter took it with a bewildered expression. Although he also acknowledged that York was a very dangerous pirate, York was ultimately not Roger, and his priority in Garp's eyes was not that high. However, when he clearly read the contents of the report, his eyes instantly widened. Dragon. How did that brat get involved with York? Garp's exclamation caused Sengoku and Suru to show surprise, and they all became curious about what exactly was written in the report. Seeing that Garp seemed on the verge of spewing profanities, Kong quickly waved his hand at the messenger, signaling him to leave quickly. The messenger was also sharp. He left the admiral's office without any hesitation. Then, as soon as he walked not far from the door, Garp's voice loudly reprimanding his son rang out. That scoundrel dragon really deserves a beating. How dare he get involved with pirates? And with a dangerous guy like York at that. No. Kong. Give me the order. I'm going to wipe out York's crew. And drag Dragon back for a good beating. Kong sighed softly upon hearing this and advised, Garp, calm down. Sengoku and Suru haven't seen this intelligence yet. They have more brains than you. Let them see it first and help you analyze it. HMPH. Garp let out an annoyed snort but still handed the report to Sengoku. Sengoku finished reading the contents of the report, also looking shocked, but he didn't immediately react, instead passing the report to Suru. Only after Suru had also finished reading did Kong question Sengoku. These past few years, I've asked you to investigate York's background. Have you found anything? Sengoku gently nodded. I found something. York, full name Adolf York, from the Ceramic Kingdom in the West Blue. His name originally didn't have D, and he doesn't have any special racial bloodline. He's a complete ordinary person. 15 years ago, the Celestial Dragons held a summer camp event in the Ceramic Kingdom in the West Blue. At this point, Sengoku couldn't help but glance at Garp. Before God Valley, the latter had no idea what the Celestial Dragons summer camp event was about, until the major battle at God Valley that broke out recently. HMPH. Garp let out an annoyed snort and turned his head away. In short, this is another evil deed caused by the Celestial Dragons themselves, isn't it? Sengoku nodded gently, his expression awkward. At that time, I was responsible for maintaining order on the island. By chance, I discovered a child who had stowed away on a warship. I asked the child his name, and he called himself Adolf York, which should be the current York. Because he was young, I didn't make him get off the ship. Coupled with my suspicions about what might happen on the island at the time, I felt pity, so after the summer camp ended, I placed him in the nearest affiliated country to live. So, when you first heard York's name a few years ago, you felt a sense of familiarity but couldn't immediately recall it. Suru asked, and Sengoku nodded gently. Garp suddenly let out a scoff and asked, do you regret it now, regret not having killed that child directly back then? Sengoku frowned slightly, a flash of annoyance in his eyes. Garp, we've been comrades for so many years. Don't you know what kind of person I am? Regardless of whether I would have known York would become like this back then, I would not have killed him. Garp rolled his eyes and curled his lips in disdain. Only Sengoku himself would believe that. He, for one, only believed that if Sengoku had known then what he knew now, he would have killed York on the spot, nipping the danger in the bud. Suru sighed softly. Arguing about these things is meaningless and will only needlessly consume our friendship. The problem now is how to deal with this Adolf D. York. Didn't I just say it? Let me go. Garp spoke, his anger having subsided considerably, but his resolve remained firm. That foolish son of mine caused trouble at God Valley and deserted, and now he's even gotten involved with York. I'm going to personally capture him. And while I'm at it, deal with York once and for all. Kong listened and nodded in approval. All right, if you're not recklessly volunteering out of emotional impulse, sending you on this mission is indeed the best choice. With Garp's current strength, defeating the current York would not be difficult. The key point was that Garp was immune to Shaki's beauty, which would greatly increase the success rate of the mission. Moreover, if this mission succeeded, it would further solidify Garp's title as a marine hero. However, to be safe, let Suru accompany you. Kong suggested, York's ability is too troublesome for anyone other than you. Suru's ability is theoretically precisely targeted at him, acting together might produce unexpected results. Garp heard this, glanced at Vice Admiral Suru, hesitated for a moment, and finally nodded. He valued the lives of his soldiers very much, and having Suru there could indeed reduce many casualties. Excellent. In that case, it's decided. Garp, Suru, you two will lead the team together, heading to the South Blue to capture York's crew. The first half of the Grand Line, Paradise. Alabasta Kingdom. Just as the Marines here had made the decision to go to the South Blue to capture York. York had already traversed the Calm Belt using Kaido's ability, entered the first half of the Grand Line, and docked at a port in Alabasta. Thanks for watching.